Hey guys, sorry, it would be nice if my computer actually worked this morning. We are having a day with technology. My couldn't I had to reload my computer. So sorry you didn't see anything for the first couple minutes. Apologize for that. I will edit that out. We just had a day. I had to restart my computer this morning. My internet went out last night. I had to restart my internet. So of course, when you restart the internet, everything goes to shit very quickly. And I couldn't add myself to the stream. Like, my computer was froze, which never ever happens, but here we are. So technology issues on a Friday. Of course, rural internet, it went out like 3 times last night, and this morning it just wasn't working for anything. So I ran my speed and it was like half of it. We are going to get into the CNN versus, or Zach Young versus CNN. He's a Navy vet who was working with the disastrous withdrawal in Afghanistan. He was not in the Navy at the time. He was a contractor working on getting people out. And during a segment with Jake Tapper, they said some things and he sued CNN for defamation. This is in Florida. It did go to trial, and it's a jury trial. I love this judge. He seems to be very fair, and let's make fun of some legacy media because that's just what we do here. Come on. And the reason that I bring this up, this is from 3 months ago. We did start watching it while it was live. But then life took over, and that didn't work out so well. Hey, King Paco. I am doing just fine. Let's move this over here. I have to see how Streamlabs works with law and crime and covering the law and crime logo. So I might have to work with some overlays and drag things. So you might see some changes during the stream. This is the first time I've streamed a trial with Streamlabs. So we're going to just work out some technical things. I am doing fair. Technology has been, and yesterday I was laid out. I did not do a damn thing all day except for take care of the little and do things that I absolutely had to do. I have the worst headache since before I got pregnant. So yeah, it was a really bad day. Like, it was a really bad day. And now I have that like migraine hangover. So y'all just hang on for the ride. We're going to start this back at the beginning. We weren't very far into it when life got out of the way or in the way. And the reason that I bring this up now is I found an article yesterday that he is suing the Associated Press for defamation related to what they said about him during this case. Go figure. Like, this is where you just keep your mouth shut about somebody. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And if you know you're not reporting facts, sometimes it's better to just not say anything. So we're going to get to this. Let's go. And I have it on 1.25 speed because, you know, I'll go full screen. There we go. Oh, that works perfectly covering the Law and Crime logo. And I love this judge so far of what I've seen. This judge looks like Kranick. Hey, Flash fan. Sorry, running late this morning, dude. Technology issues. Of course. In Flash fan, we started at the beginning.
Y'all should have gotten an email, I don't know, somewhere around 8:30, 9 o'clock or something last night with the jury instructions that I melded together. Y'all had a chance to look at those?
Yes.
And I do apologize for the audio. Welcome to court streaming.
You sent unsubmitted red line tweets to your instructions.
When did that go?
I believe the plaintiff sent them first to Ms. Smith, and then we followed up shortly thereafter.
Before we even start,
right.
Y'all recognize this ugly motherfucker? And that is my opinion. Not just his personality, but everything about him. Just god awful. I hate this. You've seen this dude on TV before, on CNN. He is their lead counsel in this trial, and he Flash fan, we were like an hour into Zach's testimony. However, because of having so many new people that aren't familiar with my trial watch, because I've never actually covered a trial since about 1,000 people joined this community, we started at the beginning because we weren't very far into it. He's the first person to testify. But I do have it at 1.25 speed. I will change it up depending on how fast people talk. That's why we do restreams and I don't watch trials live, because the pauses, the people that talk unbelievably slow, drives me nuts. It's like nails on a chalkboard. So, hey, Killdozer.
Just got to me this morning at...
I can't believe you weren't sitting at your computer waiting for them. That's a joke for the record.
Hung Hero. Thank you for 7 months of membership. Increase the green population here. I agree, my friend. Sorry, I hate CNN with all I have. Oh, and Unhung Hero, thank you for the 10 gifted membership. They went to Blah, Daniel Hall, the Poopy Cat, I love that name. Susan Anstead, Mary Beth 17, JD, HD's Chick, Charlie Balt, Patty V, Vicky L. Appreciate you. And I finally got Streamlabs set up where I can see that.
Yes, Your Honor, we did. We had a conversation before court this morning. There were 3 that we can't bring on.
Looks like on the plaintiff's ones, there were only 2 pages. Was there objections on the defense side to those 2 changes the plaintiff said?
Yes, Your Honor. On their amount of procedural?
Yeah. Well, real quick, what's the objection on the plaintiff's ones?
We're going over jury instructions.
Would understand that their
Boring as
proposed,
shit.
their rewrite to your proposed number 8 is not.
All right, jury instructions are boring as shit, but working with Captain Kern and going over the cases or the jury instructions in his daughter's case, jury instructions are very, very important. Wording and jury instructions, if you don't get it right, doesn't matter how good your case was, you fuck up jury instructions, you could screw up your entire case. It's so as much as they are boring to listen to, they're vital. And this is Zachary Young in the corner here.
Is not the law at this stage. The jury has to decide whether somebody did in fact understand, so we would object to the second change they want to make. We have no objection to inserting the words a reasonable in the first part.
Okay. What about the other one where they were saying advertised online to the entire world and therefore to Afghans?
That was not the court's holding. That was not what the court's finding was in the takeaway in that motion. The finding was he advertised his services to Afghans. That's actually what they sued us over, for the alleged implication that he advertised directly to Afghans. So that's an inappropriate assertion. Having regards to the history of this case. We have no objection to their second change, which is changing it from Young to Plaintiff in that second to last bullet.
And question, I never figured out why his books are upside down.
All right. And what about plaintiffs? You have objections to the ones proposed by the defense?
We do, Your Honor.
All right, real quick. What are they?
So, we have an objection to proposed instruction for citation of the each and every language, which we feel is extraneous because the elements that are listed there are already.
Okay.
Your Honor, it is
Hey, Mr. Chapman, stop it.
understood.
Sit down.
Yes, sir.
With respect to defendant's proposed instruction number 8, we also have disagreement over the striking of the word desperate and adding by taking money directly from Afghans, which we believe to be contrary to the court's summary judgment order as well as the first case order. With respect to proposed instruction number 8,
Hang on.
Last man, I'm wondering what will become of Cass's federal
Okay.
case and if it'll be on pacer or
instruction number 8, we request that the language proposed by the court last night be used for the edit, actually makes it the jury as to what they're required to find and what's already been found. And then one more, proposed instruction number 13, the addition.
Hang on, wait a minute.
another Texas case. Is that one you were asking about documents?
Okay.
The addition of a separate section and definition of outrageous, that argument seems to come from, and that inclusion of that definition seems to come from general case law on defamation, and I think specifically case
Which one are you looking at?
This is proposed instruction number 13.
God, I love this judge. Why do I like most of Florida judges? The Thomases not included. But Florida judges in general are amazing.
All right, go ahead. Sorry, I'm outrageous.
So I think that this this definition seems to come not from defamation cases, but from IIED cases where punitive damages were discussed. The court has already found, and we agree, unsurprisingly, that if we've met the standards for express malice and actual malice sufficiently to submit the issue to the jury, and if they find that those elements were met, then there's not a separate outrageous definition that needs to be met. So we would ask that, again, this instruction be reverted to what the court had proposed last night. And then I did have one, this is not really a change, and I think we've already agreed on this, but this is just a bit of cleanup. On its proposed instruction number 12, and I believe it's on page 12 of the set that was sent around by the court last night, there is in the third paragraph a one word that should be taken out, an extraneous word, and that is preponderance. I believe this happened when we were working through different versions and using something from case law that cited preponderance of the evidence rather than greater weight of the evidence. So we would just ask that the word preponderance be taken out and just greater weight of the evidence, which also appears there, be read to the jury.
Do you have any issue with that, on taking preponderance out of page 12, the instruction 12?
How about that last one?
Okay. All right, so other than the ones you've identified that you're objecting to their changes, you don't have an issue with their changes?
That's correct, Your Honor.
All right, hang on, let me go back in. All
Last
right, so
man,
on
it's really hard to look
proposed
documents up
instruction
right
8 on
now.
page 7, did you have an objection to that? Or they changed the second paragraph?
Yes. That's the one where we asked that we revert to what the court had
What we had before?
drafted last night.
And on 9, which would have been the definition of falsity,
That we're fine with those changes.
Yep.
And I'm going to skip these. that female lawyer is holding it down.
That they're objecting to?
Yes, Your Honor. May I approach the podium? Appropriate.
You may.
Thank you, Your Honor. As to instruction number 6, we think each and every element is necessary because it's not clearly disjunctive enough simply resting on the word "and" before that last element. So we think that's necessary and helpful to the jury to insert those words. On proposed instruction number 8 on page 6, Your Honor, we simply changed the language back to exactly what the court has already read the jury in the pre-voir dire instructions. And obviously, consistency is really important in these instructions. So we would ask the court to stand by its ruling yesterday and the language that it's already read. Your Honor, on instruction number, what's labeled number 8 on page 7, again, we discussed yesterday that if the court's going to instruct them about the implication and things that the court has already found, it's imperative to make clear that the court also make clear to the jury that it has not found that the implication is what plaintiff claims. That's the exact question for the jury. So that's the reasoning we would ask for that instruction. Your Honor, on the elements of punitive damages, it's in the first ECA's opinion in this case that outrageousness is a separate element to the punitive damages equation. So it's actual malice, express malice, and outrageous. And so it would be contrary to the holding of the first ECA in this case that there are 3 separate elements. Anything else will be up to the jury to decide what evidence overlaps for each separate element, but they really need to have the separate element laid out, and that's simply what we did in the revision to this instruction.
I don't like CNN, but this is
All
what
right.
the quorum looks like.
Any other record you want to make in terms of the instructions requested by the plaintiff? 3 minutes or less? No. In 3 minutes or less, any other record you want to make in terms of the requested changes by the plaintiff?
Your Honor, only as to the first one submitted, I think I touched on this yesterday. It's just that without any kind of clarification, it conveys the impression that the court has made a determination of intent. Just want to make sure that the jury doesn't think that we have nothing to say.
All right. Part of these instructions say that I'm going to give you the law. I may not know all the law, so these are preliminary instructions. These are not the set of instructions that are going to go back to the jury. We will finalize those in the language of those before they go back to them. In terms of the outrageousness argument, discussed that in a footnote in the summary judgment order that in general punitive damage stuff, they talk about outrageousness, but in the context of defamation, outrageousness is subsumed in the actual malice sort of analysis. That's in one of the footnotes in my order where I talk about that. For purposes right now, I'm not going to change and add the outrageousness part of it. What I will do is without objection, on page 4, which is in, I don't have a heading at the top of it. It's the bullet point of what the issues are in the case. I'm going to change Young's to plaintiffs. On page 8, which is, it says at the top proposed instruction number 10, and it talks about the definition of defamatory. Under the defamation by implication, I'll change in that first paragraph there. Even when statements are true, they are defamatory if the statements juxtapose facts and create a false impression. On page 10, without objection, and this is where the heading says proposed instruction 9 based on Florida, it's the definition of false or falsity. In the third paragraph, I'll change that to a statement is also materially false if it creates a materially false impression or implication, period. On page 12, which is proposed instruction 12, I'll take out the word preponderance in the third paragraph, second line. And otherwise, I'm going to give the instructions as drafted. So to the extent that there's a disagreement on the additional instructions, I'm going to leave the rest of them as is and not make the other changes. We can certainly clean it up if there are changes that need to be made, and we can discuss the outrageousness argument and issues later on if we need to for the final instructions and the set that go back to them. Okay.
Your Honor, the court is staying with the changed instruction for page 6, proposed during instruction 8 and count 20. The court is going to give a different instruction on that than it gave the jury yesterday.
On which one are you talking about? On page 6, instruction 8 at the top, the determining meaning.
Yes, sir. We changed it to match exactly what the court instructed the jury yesterday.
Do y'all have an issue on that?
Sorry, Your Honor, I closed them.
Last name, even Ricada.
Your Honor, we would like it the way you've written it out. I think it's important, including as it relates to the sanction motion filed late, I guess really early this morning. But
Your Honor, we did this yesterday and the court gave it to us.
All right, on that one, yeah, the instruction I gave yesterday said by creating the false impression that he was preying on Afghans by taking money directly from Afghans.
Yeah. If you think the Hales brings out the haters, he's not seen anything compared to Reed. Yeah, Reed is a very, because the corruption runs deep, it's a very, but I have to get going for just a second. My order, Walmart order got delivered, and I have frozen food sitting on my front porch that I need to get in
All right,
the
the first
freezer.
paragraph,
I
I'm
will
going
be
to
back
change
in a
on
hot minute.
page 6. The heading, it says defendant's proposed instruction number 8, determining meaning, how statements are to be construed. The second half of that first paragraph will be, that is, as implying that he was engaged in criminal activity or that he was preying on Afghans by taking money directly from Afghans. Okay. Otherwise, y'all preserved your and y'all objected, you preserved your objection, but otherwise, those would be the instructions I read preliminary before we start openings here. All right, is there anything else we need to do before we get the jurors in here?
Actually, good news, Judge. I understand we've been able to work out the stipulation issue we raised yesterday, so I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Bell.
Very well, good. Sure.
And a reminder, everybody, if you got a phone, make sure it's off or silent.
Good morning, Your Honor. We met with opposing counsel this morning and confirmed that the following exhibits are stipulated, and we'd like to move them into evidence now ahead of trial. So I'm just going to go ahead and read through them. The Plaintiff's Exhibit 7, Plaintiff's Exhibit 14, Plaintiff's Exhibit 19, Plaintiff's Exhibit 21, Plaintiff's Exhibit 24, Plaintiff's Exhibit 25, Plaintiff's Exhibit 26, Plaintiff's Exhibit 27, Plaintiff's Exhibit 31, Plaintiff's Exhibit 47, Plaintiff's Exhibit 52, Plaintiff's Exhibit 53, Plaintiff's Exhibit 55, Plaintiff's Exhibit 62, Plaintiff's Exhibit 63, Plaintiff's Exhibit 66, Plaintiff's Exhibit 69, Plaintiff's Exhibit 75, Plaintiff's Exhibit 78, Plaintiff's Exhibit 79, Plaintiff's Exhibit 80, Plaintiff's Exhibit 81, Plaintiff's Exhibit 87, Plaintiff's Exhibit 88, Plaintiff's Exhibit 95, Plaintiff's Exhibit 98, Plaintiff's Exhibit 105, Plaintiff's Exhibit 106, Plaintiff's Exhibit 115, Plaintiff's Exhibit 120, Plaintiff's Exhibit 122, Plaintiff's Exhibit 125, Plaintiff's Exhibit 128, Plaintiff's Exhibit 129, Plaintiff's Exhibit 130, Plaintiff's Exhibit 131, Plaintiff's Exhibit 132, Plaintiff's Exhibit 136, Plaintiff's Exhibit 137, Plaintiff's Exhibit 142, Plaintiff's Exhibit 156, Plaintiff's Exhibit 157, Plaintiff's Exhibit 159, Plaintiff's Exhibit 165, Plaintiff's Exhibit 168, Plaintiff's Exhibit 169, Plaintiff's Exhibit 170, Plaintiff's Exhibit 174, Plaintiff's Exhibit 185, Plaintiff's Exhibit 187, Plaintiff's Exhibit 189, Plaintiff's Exhibit 192, Plaintiff's Exhibit 201, Plaintiff's Exhibit 214, Plaintiff's Exhibit 216, Plaintiff's Exhibit 223, Plaintiff's Exhibit 229, Plaintiff's Exhibit 233, Plaintiff's Exhibit 234, Plaintiff's Exhibit 236, Plaintiff's
That's a
Exhibit
lot of
272, Plaintiff's Exhibit 273, Plaintiff's
You
Exhibit
know,
276,
The judge already looks like
Plaintiff's
y'all
Exhibit
are
277, Plaintiff's Exhibit 313, Plaintiff's Exhibit 330, Plaintiff's Exhibit 332, Plaintiff's Exhibit 333, Plaintiff's Exhibit 334, Plaintiff's Exhibit 348, as well as Plaintiff's Exhibit 82, Plaintiff's Exhibit 84,
Flash, doesn't the
Plaintiff's
judge already
Exhibit
look
92.
like, come on, guys. Like, yelling at
Plaintiff's
judge.
Exhibit 94, Plaintiff's Exhibit 117, Plaintiff's Exhibit 121, Plaintiff's Exhibit 123, Plaintiff's Exhibit 127, and Plaintiff's Exhibit 268.
Defense stipulated the admissibility of those?
They want an ERDS article.
All right. I won't run through the entirety of the list, but those exhibits, as described by Mr. Dellinger, admitted.
I think there's one more, Your Honor, because Matt, you heard this morning, Mr. Axelrod will correct me if anything wrong. A motion which we don't have to deal with now, but part of that motion sought permission to add a video that was discovered yesterday to our exhibit list. I understand does not object to it being added to our exhibit list or its admissibility, and that it should be stipulated that got it wrong. Correct.
No, that's fine, Your Honor.
So we don't have an exhibit number for it, but can we just call it exhibit 400? So we have exhibit 400, plaintiff's exhibit 400 will be the teaser trailer from Mr. Dowd.
From the 4 o'clock hour?
From the 4 o'clock hour.
Okay.
And Your Honor, pursuant to your order on the amended declaration, before we bring the jury in, plaintiffs to offer exhibit 24, 46, 48, 50, 51, 54, 55, 76, 79, 329, and 330. Pursuant to Ms. Malone's declaration.
Is there?
Yeah, Your Honor, there are, we have 3 objections. I don't think we need to deal with these now. I mean, I think if plaintiff uses them with a witness, we can deal with them now, but there's a relevance objection, there's hearsay objections, even other business records. It's the hearsay within hearsay argument that we made before. I don't object to all of them, there's just 3 documents.
His body language and voice already pissed me off. Like, if you want to see me make fun of a defendant, this is the defendant that I'm going to make fun of, because CNN sucks.
We need to admit him right now?
No.
All right, let's preserve that issue, reserve on that issue.
Thank you.
All right. All right, and we'll call the extra teaser video plaintiff's 400, and without objection, that'll be admitted. All right, anything else before we get the jurors in here?
No.
No, Your Honor.
All right. And you can bring them around this way? Or you can bring that, all right.
Could you imagine Judge Cranick
Y'all want the podium over here for openings?
I certainly do.
and Karen Reed,
Okay.
or even the Tuft of Justice?
Can we get a waiver signed by counsel?
Yeah, I'll sign it.
Over record.
There's no waiver for my clumsiness.
I love this judge, though. He has a sense of humor.
Very much.
And he seems very fair so far.
Yeah, that's the one.
If you want to double check during the break when Mr. Jones. Yeah. And I guess at some point, whatever those exhibits were, at some point, those exhibits will need to get to the clerk to throw labels on them.
Yes, we have a binder here. I think we're just using for signature, and then we will.
All right, y'all can be seated. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'll give you a moment to settle in there, and there should be the binders that's got notepads and stuff on your chairs so for you, but all right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you've taken an oath to serve as jurors in this case. And before we begin, I'm going to tell you about the rules of law that apply to this case and let you know what to expect as the trial proceeds. It's my intention to give you most of the rules of law, but it might be that I will not know for sure all of the law that will apply in this case until all of the evidence is presented. However, I can anticipate some of the law and give it to you now so that you will better understand what to be looking for while the evidence is presented. If I later decide that different or additional law applies to this case, I will tell you. In any event, at the end of the evidence, I will give you the final instructions on which you must base your verdict. At that time, you will have a complete written set of instructions, so you do not have to memorize what I'm about to tell you. All right. Plaintiff Zachary Young seeks to recover damages from defendant CNN for allegedly false statements that plaintiff claims defendant published about plaintiff on defendant's television programs, its website, and in social media posts. The law calls this type of claim a claim for defamation. The publications at issue in this case were made at the following times and through the following mediums. Number one, a video segment that aired on The Lead with Jake Tapper on November 11, 2021, hosted by Jake Tapper. 2, a video segment that aired on Connect the World on November 12, 2021, hosted by Max Foster. 3, a video segment that aired on CNN Newsroom on November 13, 2021, hosted by Boris Sanchez and Amara Walker. 4, a video segment that aired on CNN Newsroom on November 13, 2021, hosted by Jim Acosta. 5, a video segment that aired on CNN Newsroom on November 14, 2021, hosted by Michael Holmes. 6, a video posted on Facebook. 7, a video posted on CNN's website. 8, a lead tweet. 9, at NetSecCNN tweet. 10, Alex Marquardt's tweet. 11, Alex Marquardt's Instagram post. And 12, the digital article. The issues for your determination on plaintiff Zachary Young's defamation claims are: 1, whether CNN published the statements; 2, whether the statements were of and concerning Zachary Young; 3, whether the statements were materially false; 4, whether the statements were defamatory; 5, whether CNN acted at least negligently in publishing the statements; and 6, whether plaintiff suffered actual damages as a direct result of the statements. Additionally, if you find that the greater weight of the evidence supports plaintiff Zachary Young's defamation claims, you shall also consider whether plaintiff should be awarded punitive damages. If you find that the greater weight of the evidence does not support plaintiff Zachary Young's defamation claims, then your verdict must be for the defendant, CNN. I now want to instruct you on certain issues that have already been decided in this case. The following issues have already been settled. Defendant published the segment, the article, and each of the social media posts at issue. Plaintiff advertised his services to Afghans. Plaintiff did not act illegally or criminally. Plaintiff did not take money from Afghans. For purposes of the defamation by implication claim, that the publications were of and concerning plaintiff. Defendant's use of the words exorbitant and exploit to refer to plaintiff's prices and/or his business activities are not by themselves actionable because they are statements of opinion and cannot alone serve as the basis for liability for defamation. And defendant did not publish any statement that called plaintiff a scam artist or state that plaintiff was operating a scam. These are issues that have already been decided in the case and that you will not be asked to decide. In deciding the issues that you will be asked to decide, you may take into account these already decided issues. Greater weight of the evidence means the more persuasive and convincing force and effect of the entire evidence in the case. Plaintiff must prove that persons who viewed and read the segment and article understood them in the way that he claims, that is, as implying that he was engaged in criminal activity or that he was preying on Afghans by taking money directly from Afghans. The meaning of a challenge statement must be determined by its natural and probable effect on the mind of the average viewer or reader. The average viewer or reader is a reasonable person of ordinary intelligence, education, and background who would be representative of those who actually read or viewed the publication. To determine whether a statement is actionable, you must examine the statement in its totality, in the context in which it was uttered or published. You must consider all the words used, not merely a particular phrase or sentence. In addition, you must give weight to cautionary terms used by the person publishing the statement. Finally, you must consider all of the circumstances surrounding the statement, including the medium by which the statement is disseminated and the audience to which it is published. To recover on his claims for defamation, plaintiff must prove that the statement and implication he takes issue with were, in fact, reasonably understood by the ordinary reader as referring to him in particular, that is, that it must be of and concerning the plaintiff. I've already determined that for purposes of the claim for defamation by implication, the statements were published of and concerning plaintiff. For plaintiff's defamation per se claim, you must find the statements were published of and concerning Zachary Young. A statement is defamatory if it tends to harm plaintiff's reputation, tends to lower him in the estimation of the community, tends to expose him to hatred, ridicule, or contempt, tends to injure him in his business, reputation, or occupation, tends to deter third persons from associated or dealing with him, or charges that plaintiff committed a crime. Not every unpleasant or uncomplimentary statement is defamatory. A statement is not defamatory merely because it is mean, embarrassing, or upsetting.
Yeah. See, okay, hold
Florida
on.
law holds that certain
Pause.
statements are so
Hold.
harmful in nature that
Hold. Do y'all catch what the judge said? Let's reread this. And this is Florida law. Florida law. So we're gonna go back like 10 seconds. Or 15 seconds and see what the judge says defamation is. And then see if you can carry that over to what people think defamation is.
charges that plaintiff committed a crime. Not every unpleasant or uncomplimentary statement is defamatory. A statement is not defamatory merely because it is mean, embarrassing, or upsetting.
Just because it embarrasses you and it's mean to you and it upsets you does not make it defamation. So good luck trying to sue me, whatever your name was, crazy lady.
Florida law holds that certain statements are so harmful in nature that they are presumed defamatory as a matter of law. A publication may be defamatory per se when it, 1, charges that a person has committed a crime, 2, it charges a person with having an infectious disease, 3, it tends to subject one to hatred, distrust, ridicule, contempt, or disgrace, or 4, it tends to injure one in his trade or profession. Defamation can also be implied. Even when statements are true, they are defamatory if the statements juxtapose facts and create a false impression that tends to harm Zachary Young's reputation, tends to lower him in the estimation of the community, tends to expose him to hatred, ridicule, or contempt, tends to injure him in his business, reputation, or occupation, tends to deter third persons from associated or dealing with him, or charges that Zachary Young committed a crime. A defamatory implication can also be created by omitting facts. An omission of fact is defamatory if it creates a false impression that tends to harm plaintiff's reputation, tends to lower him in the estimation of the community, tends to expose him to hatred, ridicule, or contempt, tends to injure him in his business, reputation, or occupation, tends to deter third persons from associated or dealing with him, or charges that plaintiff committed a crime. To recover, the statement and implication about which plaintiff complains must be materially false. A statement is materially false if the substance or gist of the statement conveys a materially different meaning than the truth would have conveyed. A statement is also materially false if it creates a materially false impression or implication. To determine whether a statement is materially false, you should consider the context in which the statement was made. The fact that a publication may have contained some false information does not necessarily make the publication materially false. Minor inaccuracies regarding factual information do not make a publication or statement false. If the gist or sting of the allegedly defamatory statement produces the same effect in the mind of the recipient as the precise truth would have produced, then the statement is substantially true and not materially false. To be materially false, the statement must be factual in nature rather than statements of opinion. Negligence is the failure to use reasonable care, which is the care that a reasonably careful person would use under like circumstances. A statement is a legal cause of loss, injury, or damage if it directly and in natural and continuous sequence produces or contributes substantially to producing such loss, injury, or damage, so that it can reasonably be said that, but for the defamation, the loss, injury, or damage would not have occurred. In order to be regarded as a legal cause of loss, injury, or damage, a statement need not be the only cause. A statement may be a legal cause of loss, injury, or damage even though it operated in combination with the act of another if the defamation contributes substantially to producing such loss, injury, or damage. If you find for plaintiff on the defamation claims, you should award plaintiff an amount of money that will fairly and adequately compensate him for such damage as the greater weight of the evidence shows was caused by the statements and publications of the statements in question. If you find that the statement and implication plaintiff ascribes to the segment and article were not the legal cause of any actual injury to plaintiff, then your verdict must be for defendant. If you find for plaintiff and against defendant, you will consider whether, in addition to compensatory damages, punitive damages are warranted in the circumstances of this case as a punishment to CNN and as a deterrent to CNN and others. Punitive damages may be awarded if you find by clear and convincing evidence that CNN acted with express malice and actual malice. Express malice means CNN acted with a primary motive to injure Zachary Young, had ill will, hostility, or evil intention to defame Zachary Young.
It's very rare that they go over the jury instructions at the very beginning. Usually they go over jury instructions after closing arguments, they have the lawyers will argue one back and forth, and then they'll bring the jury back in and they'll read them out. He's reading them at the beginning. One of the things that I've very rarely seen.
Or was motivated by a desire to harm Zachary Young. Actual malice means CNN either knew the statements were false or published them with reckless disregard of whether they were false or not. Clear and convincing evidence differs from the greater weight of the evidence in that it is more compelling and persuasive. Clear and convincing evidence is evidence that is precise, explicit, lacking in confusion, and of such weight that it produces a firm belief or conviction without hesitation about the matter in issue. But now that you've heard the law, I want to let you know what you can expect as the trial proceeds. In a few moments, the attorneys will each have a chance to make what are called opening statements. In an opening statement, an attorney is allowed to give you his or her views about what the evidence will be in the trial and what you are likely to see and hear in the testimony. After the attorney's opening statements, the plaintiff will bring his witnesses and evidence to you. Evidence is the information that the law allows you to see or hear in deciding this case. Evidence includes the testimony of witnesses, documents, and anything else that I instruct you to consider. A witness is a person who takes an oath to tell the truth and then answers attorney's questions for the jury. The answering of attorney's questions by witnesses is called giving testimony. Testimony means statements that are made when someone has sworn an oath to tell the truth. The plaintiff's lawyer will normally ask a witness the questions first. That is called direct examination. Then the defense lawyer may ask the same witness additional questions about whatever the witness has testified to. That is called cross-examination. Certain documents or other evidence may also be shown to you during direct or cross-examination. After the plaintiff's witnesses have testified, the defendant will have the opportunity to put witnesses on the stand and go through the same process. Then the plaintiff's lawyer gets to do cross-examination. The process is designed to be fair to both sides. It is important that you remember that testimony comes from witnesses. The attorneys do not give testimony, and they are not themselves witnesses. Sometimes the attorneys will disagree about the rules for trial procedure when a question is asked of a witness. When that happens, one of the lawyers may make what is called an objection. The rules for trial can be complicated, and there are many reasons for attorneys to object. You should simply wait for me to decide how to proceed. If I say an objection is sustained, that means that the witness may not answer the question. If I say the objection is overruled, that means
he goes over here. Usually they go over this stuff, but like they went over the law, which is not normal in some courts. But I think for defamation, it's important because defamation is so, there's a fine line of what defamation is and what defamation isn't. It's not like first degree unaliving versus second degree unaliving. Yes, there's a difference, but it's a little more, it's easy to understand. And at the end of the day, murder is still murder. Whereas like something may not be defamation just because you don't like what it said. Like, yeah.
the witness may answer the question. When there is an objection and I make a decision, you must not assume from that decision that I have any particular opinion, other than that the rules for conducting a trial are being correctly followed. If I say a question may not be asked or answered, you must not try to guess what the answer would have been. That is against the rules too. Sometimes I will need to speak to the attorneys about legal elements of the case that are not appropriate for the jury to hear. The attorneys and I will try to have as few of these conferences as possible while you are giving us your valuable time in the courtroom. But if we do have to have such a conference during testimony, we will try to hold the conference at the side of my desk so that we do not have to take a break and ask you to leave the courtroom. Breaks in an ongoing trial are usually called recesses. During a recess, you still have your duties as a juror and must follow the rules even while having coffee at lunch or at home. After all the evidence has been presented to you, I will instruct you in the law that you must follow. It is important that you remember these instructions to assist you in evaluating the final attorney presentations, which come next, and later during your deliberations, to help you correctly sort through the evidence to reach your decision. The attorneys will then have the opportunity to make their final presentation to you, which are called closing arguments. After you have heard the closing arguments, I will instruct you further in the law, as well as explain to you the procedures you must follow to decide the case. After you hear those final instructions, you will go to the jury room and discuss and decide the questions I have put on a verdict form. You will have a copy of the jury instructions to use during your discussions. The discussions you have and the decisions you make are usually called jury deliberations. Your deliberations are absolutely private and neither I nor anyone else will be with you in the jury room. When you have finished answering the questions, you will give the verdict form to the bailiff, and we will all return to the courtroom where your verdict will be read. When that is completed, you will be released from your assignment as a juror. Finally, before we begin the trial, I want to give you a brief explanation of rules you must follow as the case proceeds. You must pay close attention to the testimony and other evidence as it comes into the trial. However, you must avoid forming any final opinion or telling anyone else your views on the case until you begin your deliberations. This rule requires you to keep an open mind until you have heard all of the evidence, and is designed to prevent you from influencing how your fellow jurors think until they have heard all the evidence and had an opportunity to form their own opinions. The time and place for coming to your final opinions and speaking about them with your fellow jurors is during deliberations in the jury room. After all the evidence has been presented, closing arguments have been made, and I have instructed you on the law. It is important that you hear all of the facts and that you hear the law and how to apply it before you start deciding anything. It is the things you hear and see in this courtroom that matter in this trial. The law tells us that a juror can consider only the testimony and other evidence that all the other jurors have also heard and seen in the presence of the judge and the lawyers. Doing anything else is wrong and against the law. That means that you must not do any research or investigation, directly or indirectly, about the case. You must not obtain any information about the case or about anyone involved in the case from any source whatsoever. This includes reading newspapers, watching television, or using a computer, cell phone, the internet, any electronic device, or any other means at all to get information related to this case or the people and places involved in this case. You must ignore any information about the case you might see, even accidentally, from news media or the internet or your social media platforms.
Yeah, because we all know
This is because
news
you must
media
base the decisions you will have to make in this case solely on what you hear and see in this courtroom. This applies whether you are in the courthouse, at home, or anywhere else. You must not visit places mentioned in the trial or use the internet to look at maps or pictures of any place discussed during the trial. Do not provide any information about this case to anyone, including friends or family members. Do not let anyone, including the closest family members, make comments to you or ask questions about the trial. Jurors must not have discussions of any sort with friends or family members about the case or the people and places involved. So, do not let even the closest family members make comments to you or ask questions about the trial. In this age of electronic communications, I want to stress again that just as you must not talk about this case face-to-face, you must not talk about this case by using an electronic device. You must not use phones, tablets, computers, or other electronic devices to communicate about this case. Do not send or accept any messages related to this case or your jury service. Do not discuss this case or ask for advice by any means at all, including posting on social media, including electronically, or on the internet through email, text messaging, blogs, or social media, or any other electronic communication whatsoever. When we are in a recess, do not discuss anything about the trial or the case with each other or with anyone else. If attorneys approach you, don't speak with them. The law says they are to avoid contact with you. If an attorney will not look at you or speak to you, do not be offended or form a conclusion about that behavior. The attorney is not supposed to interact with jurors outside the courtroom and is only following the rules. The attorney is not being impolite. If an attorney or anyone else does not try to speak with you or says something about, if an attorney or anyone else does try to speak with you or says something about the case in your presence, please inform the bailiff immediately. Only you get to deliberate and answer the verdict questions at the end of the trial. I will not intrude in your deliberations at all. I am required to be neutral. You should not assume that I prefer one decision over another. You should not try to guess what my opinion is about any part of the case. It would be wrong for you to conclude that anything that I say or do means that I am for one side or another in the trial. Discussing and deciding the facts is your job alone. All cell phones or other types of electronic devices must be turned off while you are in the courtroom. Turned off means that the phone or other electronic device is actually off and not in a silent or vibrating mode. You may use those devices during recesses, but even then you must not use your phone or electronic device to find out any information about the case or communicate with anyone about the case or the people involved in the case. Do not take photographs, video recordings, or audio recordings of the proceedings or your fellow jurors. After each recess, please double check to make sure your device is turned off. At the end of the case, while you are deliberating, you must not communicate with anyone outside of the jury room. You cannot have in the jury room any cell phones, computers, or other electronic devices. If there are breaks in the deliberations, I may allow you to communicate with your family or friends, but do not communicate about the case or your deliberations. If someone needs to contact you in an emergency, the court can receive messages and deliver them to you without delay, and we provided that phone number to you yesterday to give to anybody that might need to get a hold of you. In deciding this case, it is your duty as jurors to decide the issues and only those issues that I will submit for your determination. You must come to an agreement about what your answers will be. Your agreed upon answers to my questions are called your jury verdict. The evidence in this case consists of the sworn testimony of the witnesses, all exhibits received in the evidence, and all facts that were admitted to or agreed to by the parties, and any fact of which the court has taken judicial notice. In reaching your verdict, you must think about and weigh the testimony and any documents or other material that has been received in evidence. You may also consider any facts that were admitted to or agreed to by the lawyers. Your job is to determine what the facts are. You may use reason and common sense to reach conclusions. You may draw reasonable inferences from the evidence. In addition, you may, but are not required to, make certain adverse inferences I will instruct you about. But you should not guess about things that were not covered here. And you must always apply the law as I've explained it to you. Let me speak briefly about witnesses. In evaluating the believability of any witness and the weight you will give the testimony of any witness, you may properly consider the demeanor of the witness while testifying, the frankness or lack of frankness of the witness, the intelligence of the witness, any interest the witness may have in the outcome of the case, the means and opportunity the witness had to know the facts about which the witness testified, the ability of the witness to remember the matters about which the witness testified, and the reasonableness of the testimony of the witness considered in the light of all the evidence in the case and in the light of your own experience and common sense. You will hear opinion testimony on certain technical subjects from persons referred to as expert witnesses. You may accept such opinion testimony, reject it, or give it the weight you think it deserves, considering the knowledge, skill, experience, training, or education of the witness, the reasons given by the witness for the opinion expressed, and all the other evidence in the case. It is entirely proper for a lawyer to talk to a witness about what testimony the witness would give if called to the courtroom. The witness should not be discredited just because the witness talked with a lawyer about his or her testimony. If you find that plaintiff destroyed or otherwise caused evidence to be unavailable while it was within his possession, custody, or control, and the evidence would have been material in deciding the disputed issues in this case, then you may, but are not required to, infer that this evidence would have been unfavorable to plaintiff. The court has already determined that plaintiff had a duty to preserve the following evidence, but he destroyed or otherwise caused this evidence to be unavailable. 1. Screenshots not preserved, transferred, or saved in electronic format after November 11, 2021. 2. Data not preserved or transferred pertaining to messages or phone calls made on plaintiff's old cell phone after November 11, 2021. 3. Signal messages that were deleted and not saved after November 11, 2021. And 4. Plaintiff's LinkedIn private messages that were deleted after November 11, 2021. You may consider this, together with other evidence, in determining the issues in this case. If you would like to take notes during the trial, you may do so. On the other hand, of course, you are not required to take notes if you do not want to. That will be left up to you individually. You have been provided with a notepad and a pen for use if you wish to take notes. Any notes that you will take will be for your personal use. However, you should not take them with you from the courtroom. During recesses, the bailiff will take possession of your notes and will return them to you when we reconvene. After you have completed your deliberations, the bailiff will collect your notes, which will be immediately destroyed. No one will ever read your notes. If you take notes, do not get so involved in note-taking that you become distracted from the proceedings. Your notes should be used only as aids to your memory. Whether or not you take notes, you should rely on your memory of the evidence, and you should not be unduly influenced by the notes of other jurors. Notes are not
See, like I told you, I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that they're doing construction outside my house. They're building more houses that way. So there's all these people that aren't normally here. There's construction vehicles, they're digging, stuff like that. So can you hear me now? Oh no. Okay, I am back. Okay. I paused because for some reason I lost chat and then my stuff hid, but the CNN, the YouTube video kept playing. No, Jeff. Well, yeah, someone is having problems. Remember that the judge read out the definition of defamation, and I made a joke about it because that was what that Lori G, whatever her name is, who's always in Fleece's chat, keeps saying they're gonna sue me for defamation against Lynette and John. And then she keeps mentioning RICO as well. And I'm like, tell me you don't know what you're talking about. I don't understand RICO a lot, like in depth. However, I know that reading legal documents on the internet, public documents, is not RICO. So, so the haters are having some issues. But also, this is why I like YouTube Premium, because I don't have to deal with ads.
In determining a verdict, you are bound by the same rules of evidence that control the attorney's questions. If I decide that the question may not be asked under our rules of evidence, I will tell you. Otherwise, I will direct the question to the witness. The attorneys may then ask follow-up questions if they wish. By providing this procedure, I do not mean to suggest that you must or should submit written questions for the witnesses. In most cases, the lawyers will have asked the necessary questions. As I instructed you before this trial started, you as jurors will decide this case based solely on the evidence presented in this courtroom. After you leave here, you must not conduct any research directly or indirectly about this case, including the facts, the legal issues, or the individuals and entities involved. This is important for the same reasons that jurors have long been instructed to limit their exposure to traditional forms of media and information such as television and newspapers. You also must not communicate with anyone in any way about this case. And you must ignore any information about the case that you might see on the internet or social media, including through email, text messaging, blogs, or social media, such as Facebook or X, or any other electronic communication whatsoever. Any other instructions from the plaintiffs before we do openings?
No, Your Honor.
Anything else from the defense?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right. All right. Now you've got those instructions.
Also, as much as I don't like CNN, do you notice what their lawyers have versus someone who hates my guts because I wouldn't talk to him and puts me in legal documents? This is called decorum. Not speaking unless you're spoken to, asking for permission to do things, standing up when you talk to the judge. This is decorum. You don't have to like people to have some fucking respect.
We'll proceed with opening statements. Plaintiff, read.
Your Honor, Mr. Roach will be hearing the opening statements.
All right, Mr. Roach. Y'all ready?
Ready.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Roach.
Henry, do you mind if I move away from the podium?
That's
In August 2021, as American troops withdrew from Afghanistan under President Joe Biden's order, the world braced for the Taliban's return to power. Anyone watching the news at that time witnessed the chaotic situation that unfolded, as millions of people attempted to flee the war-torn country. But CNN reporters, sitting at their desks in Washington, D.C., wanted to tell Americans an even more sensational story. You see, they had received a tip that Zachary Young, a veteran and CIA-trained operative, was illegally preying on desperate Afghans in a black market operation. Now, if that were the truth, there'd be nothing wrong with CNN telling millions of Americans and exposing this black market. The problem for CNN? It couldn't confirm any of the facts. It tried to get evidence that Zach is charging Afghans, but everyone they spoke to either said that they had never heard of Zach, or that Zach only worked with corporations like Bloomberg, who wanted to pay professionals like Zach to get their people out of the country. The facts didn't matter. CNN felt that they had a sensational story that would drive ratings, and they didn't care about the truth.
How do we know that? Because the emails and behind-the-scenes video footage show that CNN took pleasure in casting Zach as the villain for their hit piece. To use the words of CNN's lead reporter on the story, it was all theater. The week before this story was set to air, that same lead reporter texted his editor, "I'm going to nail that Zachary Young motherfucker." That editor texted him back, "I'm going to hold you to that, cowboy." And as they were putting the finishing touches on a hit piece that would upend Zach's entire professional reputation, that same lead reporter wrote to another colleague, "It's Zach's funeral, bucko." On November 11th, 2021, that story aired on Primetime Evening News with Jake Tapper. Corey? Zach's face was plastered across TV screens around the world, painting him as a black market operator who preyed upon desperate Afghans. We're in this courtroom today because CNN chose theater over truth and destroyed the life of an American patriot. You're going to hear how this story turned Zach's life upside down, despite warnings from CNN's own employees that the story had more holes than Swiss cheese and was 80% emotion and 20% obscured fact. When CNN's attorneys get up here, they're going to play the same playbook that CNN did, and try to convince each of you that Zach is a bad guy, even though they know that Zach didn't do anything illegal and he didn't take any money from Afghans. They know this because they've spent the 3 years since that hit piece aired trying to dig up any dirt they could on Zach, and they've come up empty-handed. You heard the court read you instructions this morning that Zach didn't do anything illegal. You heard the court tell you that Zach didn't take any money from Afghans. There simply is no excuse for what CNN did, and we're going to show that to you through the evidence. This trial is important, not just for Zach. At the end of this case, my partner, Val Friedman, is going to get up here, and he's going to summarize all the evidence that you're going to hear over the next couple of weeks. And you're going to have an opportunity to send a message. That message will be heard not just in CNN's boardroom, but by every news organization in America. The message that we're going to ask you to send is that reckless journalism is un-American, it's dangerous, and if media companies engage in theater in the newsroom, Americans will hold them accountable in the courtroom. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, thank you for your service. My name is Kyle Roche, and I'm joined at counsel's table with my partners Val Friedman and Joe Delich, and together we have the privilege of representing Zachary Young. Also with us back there is Corey Allen. He's going to make sure that all the exhibits and all the technology work smoothly throughout this trial.
Good luck with that.
I want to spend the rest of my time with you this morning covering two topics: the evidence and the issues you will decide at the end. The evidence can be broken down into 3 different time periods. First, I'm going to introduce you to Zachary Young, about how he served this country, and about the business he ran before CNN upended his life. Next, we're going to cover the events that unfolded at CNN's headquarters between October and November 2021. This is the period of time that CNN pitched, pursued, and published their hit piece on Zach. This period concludes on November 11, 2021, when that hit piece aired on Jake Tapper. And as you heard from the judge's instructions this morning, the multiple publications at CNN republished thereafter on different shows and also on CNN.com. Finally, we're going to conclude with the aftermath, when Zach's reputation went from patriot to criminal. And when his career as a private intelligence and security consultant went from making him more than $350,000 a year to being worthless. We'll conclude today by addressing the issues that each of you will have to decide. There's 3 questions at a high level, 3 questions that you're going to have to answer at the end of it, and all of the evidence that we're going to show you is going to help you decide each of those 3 issues. This is a defamation instruction. Defaming someone means you've done harm to their reputation by publishing a material fact that is untrue. So, in order for you to understand the harm that Zach suffered by CNN's publication, you need to understand who he was before CNN put his face on TV screens around the world. Zach is 49 years old, and he was born in Pennsylvania.
It's a good
He had
49.
a typical American childhood, and like many young boys, he grew up proud of his country. He has 3 brothers, Matt, his brother over there, and he was raised by his mom. In the early 1990s, Zach, after his parents divorced, Zach moved with his mom to Wellington, Florida, which is about an hour outside of Palm Beach, where he pursued a degree in history. But towards the end of the studies, Zach felt a calling to serve his country. So in 1997, he decided to pause the studies and pursue and join the Navy to become unfortunately, and it was discovered that he had suffered multiple herniated discs in his lower back. As a result, the Navy forced him to medically retire, and he was honorably discharged. Zach returned to college and finished his degree in history. But he made a commitment to himself to overcome that injury and still serve this country. So, not only did he decide to pursue graduate studies, but he also decided to take what he had learned in the Navy and join an intelligence operations company called Blackwater.
That's the only thing I don't like.
Was founded in 1997 by a former Navy SEAL. At Blackwater, Zach continued to build on that skill set that he learned in the Navy, learning additional skills such as land combat, use of foreign weapons, battlefield first aid, and how to navigate dangerous foreign terrain. Between his time in the Navy and at Blackwater, he developed a particular set of skills that very few Americans possess. He was deployed to multiple tours in conflict regions, including Afghanistan and Pakistan. His mission, while he was deployed, was to provide personal protection to U.S. diplomats and employees of a U.S. government agency as they worked to gather intelligence that would help America take down the Taliban. During this time, one particular government agency took an interest in Zach. Now, Zach is not going to be able to testify directly to you about the name of that agency because of his obligations. But evidence produced by CNN and a third party in this litigation, in the discovery phase of this litigation, show that that agency was the CIA. In 2002, Zach went through a 2-year recruitment process with the CIA, where he was subjected to numerous interviews, cognitive ability testing, and psychological evaluations. In 2004, he was hired by the CIA. Now,
Objection, Your Honor.
Oh,
This was covered by one of your early pretrial rulings.
we discussed this yesterday. There's documents produced in this case that the jury's going to see.
In terms of, I mean,
I'm not going to go
going beyond those, I'll sustain the objection.
Thank you.
No. You can't
All
cover
right,
anything
he
more
said
about Zach's time in the CIA because that information is confidential. Very few people even knew about his affiliation with the CIA, and those who did, like his wife, were given very few details. They never knew where he was going, what he was doing, or who he'd be meeting with. Zach's work took him all around the world, and he ended up in Vienna, the capital of Austria. It was there that he met his wife, Irina, and after many years of service to the U.S. government, he decided to settle down in Vienna with his wife. He remains a U.S. citizen, paying U.S. taxes, and voting in U.S. elections. Do you remember that company, Blackwater, we talked about a few minutes ago? Well, after Zach retired from government service, he decided to pursue a career as a private intelligence and security consultant, with dreams of one day building a company like Blackwater where he could work with like-minded patriots. Over a 3-year period, he worked for 3 different intelligence firms: Arrow, Frontier, and Near East Consulting. And you're going to hear a lot in this trial that this work in this particular industry that I hadn't heard about until I started working on this case. It's based primarily on word of mouth. And during Zach's time at Arrow, one of the 3 companies I told you he worked at, he met a group of other professionals that, together with Zach, came up with a revolutionary idea. A private company founded by the dream team of American intelligence professionals that would help countries abroad, American allies, develop out their intelligence operations. In 2018, Zach's big break came when an American company called DynCorp landed a $400 million project to help the Saudi Arabian government build out the program that Zach had helped develop. Unsurprisingly, the first person that they decided to hire was Zach. And until about 2021, Zach worked as a director of training and in various other roles for DynCorp. His career as a private intelligence and security consultant was taking off, and he was proud of the work that he was doing in the private sector. Around this time, towards the end of August 2021, a new group of companies developed a need for Zach's skill set. See, this was the time, August 21, when the Biden administration began to administer some evacuations from Afghanistan. But it wasn't enough. American and European companies needed help getting their people. Around this time, an FBI agent recommended Zach to an American company called Audible. Some of you may have heard of Audible before. It's a multi-billion-dollar company that makes audiobooks. If you've bought audiobooks on Amazon, sometimes it gives you the Audible option. It's also a subsidiary of Amazon. See, Audible had 3 women on the ground in Afghanistan, and they needed help getting their people out. Zach told them that he could help run an operation by relying on his former intelligence network, who had boots on the ground in Afghanistan. Audible hired him, and Zach sprang to action. And he successfully evacuated all 3 women out of Afghanistan. Over the next couple months, Zach went on to successfully evacuate 22 women on behalf of 4 companies. I already told you about Audible. He also ran 4 successful evacuations for women on behalf of the multi-billion-dollar news company called Bloomberg. And he evacuated an additional 15 women on behalf of 2 nonprofit organizations, one called Hero Inc. and another called Civil Fleet. Now, when CNN gets up here to argue, I imagine that they're going to say something like, well, okay, Zach didn't do anything illegal. They were wrong on that. But I imagine they're going to try to paint a narrative of Zach sitting in Austria in his underwear, profiting off of these corporate evacuations. You're going to hear from both Zach and a retired U.S. general why that narrative is false. It's false because if Zach tried to enter Afghanistan to help with the evacuations, it would have been a suicide mission. As a white man, Zach would have stuck out like a sore thumb, endangering not only himself, but those he was trying to evacuate. Zach had to rely on his network of intelligence professionals who were on the ground in Afghanistan, who all looked like Afghani men, because he needed the evacuation period in the timeline. November 11, 2021. I want to take you inside the headquarters of CNN in the Tibet hippies. The timeline here is actually very short. October 27, 2021. Just 4 days later, that story was greenlit by CNN's executive vice president of program. After the pitch was greenlit, CNN spent 2 days pursuing the facts. By November 3rd, they had fully completed it to make the DMJ happen. By November 10th, that story was ready to be published. This was 2 hours to respond. Now, we also heard that there's different burdens of proof for us to show our claims, and in order for us to be entitled to punitive damages, we need to show you by clear and convincing evidence that CNN acted with malice. We welcome our burden, and we intend to show you it's not a close call. If you think it's a close call, don't give us a dime, because the evidence we're going to show you is overwhelming. You're going to have, when you go back and deliberate at the end of this trial, you're going to have all the emails and text messages between CNN up to the airing of the hippies. You're going to reporter on the story, laughing about sending Zach up on the hippies. And at the core of this trial is just that. Truth versus theater. When CNN's employees get up here to testify, I want you to think, are they telling you the truth, or are they just giving you more theater? Some of you may remember when the news used to be different, when it wasn't about clicks, scandal, and drama. When we had American reporters like Walter Cronkite, who's covered everything from Watergate to the moon landing, and actually cared about delivering Americans the facts they needed in order to make decisions as a nation. You have an opportunity in this trial to move the pendulum back towards sanity intermediate. So, how did the CNN story start? Well, in order to walk you through what happened, I need to introduce you to a few individuals who are involved in the story. First, Joel Kornetsky, Alex Marquardt, you've heard his name a couple times already, Katie Boat-Lillis, and Tom Lumley. You're going to hear a few other CNN employees testify during this trial, but those are the key people who are involved with the story, and I want to preview some of the evidence and some of the testimony that you're going to hear from them. The story starts with Kornetsky. She's a Harvard-educated, American-born activist who's self-described as an ally towards Afghanistan and a social entrepreneur. She connects with Zach on LinkedIn after she sees one of his posts describing the services he's providing to corporations. Zach is initially civil with Kornetsky. And even though he thinks she's wasting his time, he breaks down his cost structure for her on the evacuations. Things, though, get heated between Kornetsky and Zach when she accuses him of planning for life on a private island. By this point, Zach understands that she's just trying to attack his work on corporate evacuations. So he tells her, go waste somebody else's time. He then blocks her and goes back to his work coordinating evacuations. Now, Kornetsky's not very happy about this. So she reaches out to a CNN reporter named Alex Marquardt and asks him if he wants to run a story about an American mercenary who's getting people out of Afghanistan and dumping them in Islamabad. After a single call with Kornetsky, Marquardt, the lead reporter on the segment that ended up airing on Jake Tapper, gets his idea for a big story. He's got his bad guy, the American mercenary. He was going to cast Zach as a predator running a black market operation to extort desperate Afghans. Marquardt's initial pitch CNN was initially pitched. He titled it Extortion. I love the piece to expose Afghan. CNN wasn't actually interested in the facts. They just wanted sensational media. You're going to hear how Marquardt was so focused on Zach that he ignored real leads. Perhaps most telling is a text message exchange between him and Kornetsky. She tells Marquardt about an Afghan who paid to get out. But when he hears that Afghan didn't pay Zach, Marquardt tells Kornetsky, this story doesn't align with mine, unfortunately. Think about that. Marquardt is willing to ignore real stories about real Afghans because they don't align with the hit piece he's trying to run, where Zach is the villain. Now, Marquardt has zeroed in on Zach as his villain, but in order to make him a villain, he needs to find one of his victims. Unfortunately for Marquardt, he never finds any victim because Zach never charged any Afghan. But he does find a few people that Zach communicated with on LinkedIn. What he learns is that Zach only worked with corporations, the corporations I told you about earlier today. But Marquardt didn't want to tell a story about corporate evacuations. That isn't sexy, it isn't scandal, and it's not what drives eyeballs to the network. Marquardt never really tried to contact the corporations that Zach had successfully conducted evacuations for. Meanwhile, buzz starts building in CNN's headquarters about Marquardt's big piece. Taglines start getting shared a bunch amongst a number of eager employees, CNN employees who are excited about this piece. They exchange topics like extortion of desperate Afghans and a shadowy black market. Amongst all the excitement, CNN's executive vice president says that the story on Zach would make a great story or great piece for the lead with Jake Tapper, CNN star reporter. November 1, 2021, the story is greenlit. CNN has no evidence that Zach charged any Afghan. They have no evidence that he's done anything illegal. It doesn't matter. They have a tragic situation. People trying to escape a war-torn country. They have, as one CNN employee put it, a punchable face for their lead, Zach's face. Now all they need is theater. By this point, you're going to see in the documents that CNN's recklessness turns to maliciousness. Someone texts Marquardt, I'd love to see you take this guy down. Marquardt obliges. Later that same day, he texts an editor from CNN, I'm going to nail this Zachary Young motherfucker. His editor leans in and tells him, I'm going to hold you to that, cowboy. This brings us to phase 2 of the hit piece, November 2nd and November 3rd, when they pursued Zach. We're now 1 week out from the hit piece airing. Marquardt tells his colleague, Katie Bolillis, the third person I told you about a couple minutes ago, that he wants to get Zach to a place where he's calling him on camera. See, they want to get that shot for the hit piece. The entrapment begins. Marquardt doesn't want Zach to know that he's lining him up. So he tells his colleague, Miss Lillis, that she should be the one doing all of the texting with Zach.
Hi, Dad.
They conspire to deceive Zach. They don't tell him that they were planning on reporting on him. They don't tell him they've basically already written the story. Instead, Marquardt tells Lillis, if the cover is blown, just tell Zach we're doing stories on evacuations. And we just want to talk to him about the lay of the land. Lillis is happy to help. She thinks Zach is an asshole and a shitbag. You're going to see the web of lies that Lillis was weaving in real time. While Lillis is conspiring with Marquardt about how to deceive Zach, she tells Zach, I'm a straight shooter. I'll be frank with you about where we are. This is a text message exchange between Katie Lillis and Zach. While this whole ruse is going on, Marquardt texts Lillis, "It's Zach's funeral, bucko." To which Lillis responds, as she's texting Zach that she's the straight shooter, "Ha ha, bucko." Why does Marquardt declare it's Zach's funeral? Well, he's about to stage a shot of him calling Zach and Zach not picking up. He knows that if he concludes that shot in the segment, it's going to make Zach look guilty for not answering questions. Even though what's really going on is Zach has no idea somebody's about to call him. He has no idea it's Marquardt. And he has no idea that CNN's about to run a story on him. We've got the raw footage of Marquardt making that call to Zach. You're going to see it in this trial. And what you're going to see is that Marquardt staged the entire thing. There's actually 2 calls that are made in the video, a real one and a fake one, where he pretends to call Zach. And when Marquardt thinks the cameraman is no longer filming him, when he thinks no one is watching, he reveals what the piece is really about. He takes a step back, he puts his hands in the air, and he declares theater. He's just staged the downfall of a man, and he declares the thing theater. Right after the theater video, Marquardt celebrates Lillis, Katie Lillis, that he got a shot. He texts another colleague, "We've got everything they need. They're ready to publish." The third P. It's now November 10th, the day before the story runs. Marquardt has been waiting until the last possible moment to reveal himself to Zach, because he knows he needs a record of him actually reaching out to Zach. So approximately 24 hours before the story runs on Jake Tapper, he reaches out to Zach, and he says, "Hey, CNN's about to write a story about you." He knows it's evening, Indiana time, where Zach lives, and so he knows it's unlikely that Zach's going to respond. Less than 24 hours later, on November 11th, we're now on the day the piece is set to air. And asks him if he'll send him a list of questions that CNN wants answered. He wants to set the story straight. He wants to make sure that they're going to do a story on him, that they have their facts right. He doesn't know what the story's about. This gets Marquardt upset. Why? Because if he gives Zach an opportunity to respond to the reporting, it could jeopardize the story going on Jake Tapper, which could be bad for him. He texts Katie Lillis, "For fuck's sakes, fucking Young just texted me." But Marquardt comes up with a plan. He'll send him a list of questions, and he'll give him an impossibly short window to respond. Marquardt does just that, and he tells Zach, "You've got 2 hours." Zach responds in no uncertain terms. That's definitely not a realistic deadline. In any case, I can tell you for sure, some of your facts or assertions, I think they're supposed to be a sure there, for sure are not accurate. And if they are published, I will seek legal damages.
He warned him.
Did CNN care?
Nope.
No. They published the Jake Tapper story anyway.
God, I hate CNN.
The segment itself is 4 minutes long, and I have some evidence I still want to get through with you, and I have limited time. Zach's going to be the first person that testifies in this trial, and we're going to show you not just the Tapper segment, but all the republications of it when Zach gets up there to take the stand. You may see it when CNN gets up here to do its opening, but there's still some evidence I want to cover with you.
CNN are
The Jake Tapper show
human beings.
was seen by more than 650,000 individuals that night. CNN would go on to republish it at least 8 more times, and in total, more than 2 million people saw the segment around the world. Which brings me to the fourth person I wanted to speak with you about, Tom Lumley. Lumley was responsible for creating the digital article, the CNN.com article I told you about earlier. Now, he doesn't find out about Marquardt's story until just a couple hours before it's aired. Some of the employees you're going to see had known for like more than a week. Lumley finds out like 2 hours before it goes live. He tells one of his colleagues, though, that the story is full of holes, like Swiss cheese. That CNN employee writes him back, "Yeah, it's 80% emotion, 20% obscured fact." Lumley tells another colleague that there's a fundamental question missing in the story: whether Zach actually preyed on any Afghans. Lumley saw the obvious problems with the piece. And you will see that evidence that Lumley found it so disturbing that he couldn't believe that CNN's leadership actually approved the story on Young. One of Lumley's co-workers agreed, writing, "The inference running through Alex's story that these people are just built-in desperate Afghans might not be fair at all." CNN willingly ignored Lumley's journalistic concerns. After the article was sent for approval, Lumley writes that he just wanted it done to diffuse the drama and that it's only half a good story. At the end of the day, there was no one at CNN that was willing to stand up for truth. Theater prevailed. Which brings me to the final chapter in this trial, Zach's life after the hit piece. To use Marquardt's own words, it was Zach's funeral. The career that he had spent 2 decades building was decimated. You're going to hear how, after the story aired, Zach's former intelligence professionals wanted nothing to do with him. Overnight, he went from patriot to criminal, and his career as a private intelligence and security consultant has not recovered. CNN's reckless journalism stole Zach's income and reputation. But it wasn't just his career that suffered. Zach's paid a heavy cost in his personal life as well. After many years of service to the U.S. government, he deserved the life that he was living, and CNN took that from him without any justification. Now, I anticipate that CNN's attorneys and witnesses will make a couple arguments to continue to try to attack Zach's work in Afghanistan. CNN can no longer claim that he did anything illegal. The court has just told you that he did not. CNN can't claim that he took any money from Afghans because, again, the court has told you that you must accept that fact as true. So I imagine that they will create new claims to try to distract you from the issues in this case. I want to briefly address a couple of the arguments that I think they're likely to make. First, you're going to hear from Zach himself that about a month after the CNN piece aired, he deleted LinkedIn messages and other documents. CNN will argue that Zach did that to hide bad evidence. Zach will tell you that's not true. That he did it because he was in a panic, because he was worried that the Austrian government was going to see the story and the police were going to show up at his house, and that he had a bunch of online trolling on him from people who saw the story on his LinkedIn account. Zach deleted his LinkedIn messaging to stop the online trolls. The idea that he did that to hide some black market activity, when the court has instructed you that he did not do anything illegal, is simply a fiction that CNN hopes you believe. Second, you're going to see communications where Zach is rude, flippant, and arrogant. He calls Kornetsky, the person I told you about in the beginning who first found Zach, he calls her a spiteful bitch after she accuses him of charging $15,000 for the corporate evacuations. There's also messages with somebody living in Colorado where after Zach finds out the guy's wasting his time, he says, "You can't be serious, have them run for the border and see how far they get." Zach's language is rude and abrasive. He doesn't like distractions and he's mission focused. We've all seen the spy movies where actors like Liam Neeson pretend to have a particular set of skills. Hollywood does not cast its spies to be warm and cuddly, and in the real world, you don't want them to be either.
I'm really glad they addressed this in openings because that's one thing that CNN was going to attack. I just know. Like, you look bad, they're going to try to make everything look bad because you have an attitude when you text someone. It's what everybody does. They take the worst of it and make it the biggest thing in the world instead of looking at the context. So I'm super glad they addressed this in everything, like straight out of the gate before CNN got the chance to. Because now that completely mutes CNN's point.
None of this means that Zach is criminal. None of this means that he took any money from Afghans. Do not let CNN use these to distract you from the real issues in this case. Which brings me to the conclusion. I want to thank you for your time yesterday, today, and in the coming weeks. We all know that your time is valuable, and we're going to do our best to present this case as efficiently as possible. I want to end today where you will end, with the three issues that you'll decide at the end of this trial. First, you're going to be asked to decide whether CNN defamed Zach. There's two ways you can find CNN liable for defamation. Either their use of the word black market implied that Zach did something illegal, or the story as a whole painted Zach as a bad actor preying on desperate Afghans. Now, CNN's probably going to argue that the word black market doesn't mean illegal. They're going to tell you that the word means unregulated, like the kid at the corner selling lemonade at a stand. Problem for CNN? That's not how the dictionary defines it. We're going to show you that consistent with common sense, your common sense, that the dictionary defines the term black market to mean an illegal trade or traffic. Don't let CNN redefine words. Next, if you find CNN liable, you're going to be asked to determine how much to award Zach. There's two forms of damages that Zach is seeking: economic damages for his lost future income, and pain and suffering damages. Finally, you're going to be asked to decide whether CNN should be punished. Punitive damages are different from the type of damages that Zach is seeking directly. In order for Zach to recover punitive damages, he must prove that CNN acted with malice. Well, what does that mean? If CNN just negligently published their story and got the facts wrong, they still might be liable to Zach for the economic harm, but we wouldn't be entitled to punitive damages. For example, if I was sped into the parking lot of the courthouse this morning in a hurry to get to this room on time, and I crashed into Bell's parked car, I'd be responsible for paying for the damage I caused to his car. I made a mistake, but I'm still responsible for making Val whole because it's my fault he's got a massive dent in his rear bumper now. The evidence that you're going to see in this case is going to show you that CNN's reporting was not a mistake. From the beginning, they set out to destroy Zach's reputation. They didn't care about the truth, they cared about theater, and they cared about ratings. You're going to have an opportunity to do something incredible in this trial. You're going to have an opportunity to send a message to mainstream media. You're going to have an opportunity to change an industry. When I sit down in a moment, CNN's attorney is going to deliver their opening statement. You're going to hear from CNN's attorneys and their employees in this trial, and I imagine they're going to testify how it's CNN's mission to deliver the facts, how they care about that mission, and how there is nothing malicious about CNN's reporting. But when you hear what they say today in this courtroom, compare it to the words they used in their text messages and emails before this lawsuit. Compare it to what CNN said before they were facing a 9-figure verdict. When you make that comparison, when you consider the evidence, you decide who's telling you the truth and who's giving you theater. Thank you.
Y'all doing all right?
Joe, would you entertain a 5-minute quick break?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to see
Yeah.
from a standpoint. Yeah.
We have to do a 5-minute recess because we have to completely rework how we do our opening statements because what we wanted to do isn't going to work because they already addressed. Yeah, you know where I'm going with that.
Just from a timing standpoint, I don't want to cut you short or break your opening up.
Yeah, I'm probably going to go, I'm guessing 45 minutes, 50 minutes?
Yeah,
5 minutes.
that'll get us closer to 11 o'clock. So I didn't want you all sitting there if you needed a break. All right, why don't we do this? We'll take a 5-minute break real quick. I don't know if y'all wrote anything in your notepads or whatever, but just take your notepads and throw them in the folders that are there, and you can leave them on your chairs. I'm going to give you an instruction that you're going to hear repeatedly. You heard yesterday for the first time, but we're about to take a recess. Remember, all the rules I've given you apply even when we're outside the courtroom. Such All right, is there anything before we bring it back in?
No, you're on.
All right, if you got them all, bring it back in. Kristen?
It'd make it more comfortable for the jury to come through here and swing around rather than having to run the gauntlet over there.
I thought we were going to bring them around and come in this way, but
Also, the
talk with my bailiff about which way we're bringing them in.
Okay, I won't do that. Okay. Hold on. Sorry, mama mode. You have to raise the hand.
Y'all can be seated. Give 'em a minute to settle in.
I'll wait till you tell me to go.
I'm in your theater. I'm in your theater. I'm in your theater. Wow.
Yeah, ready?
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Axelrod.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yesterday was really quick, so I didn't really get a proper chance to introduce myself. My name is Dave Axelrod. It's my privilege to represent CNN. For better or for worse, you all are going to hear a lot from me over the next 2 weeks. And just off the
For worse, we've heard you talk on CNN and we don't like you. I am biased against CNN. Can you tell?
bat, we thank you for your attention and your service. Along with me, Joe Bailey sitting over there, Sandy Sanborn, and Chuck Tobin, who's somewhere around here, are the lawyers representing CNN. For me, the most important person in the courtroom is Gianni DeMezza back there, who makes sure all the documents go up well and make sure that we're doing everything the right way. And then, of course, Adam Levine, who is a senior vice president of news for CNN, is sitting there with us as well. And you'll be hearing from him testify later in this trial. But when you came in here, before you started hearing the instructions from the judge, and before you heard Mr. Roach, before you listened to me,
Yeah,
you
he's
probably
one of
started
their-
saying, why are we here? And the
TV
simple
lawyers.
answer is we're here because in November 2021, CNN published 2 stories about Afghan evacuations. One was the video segment, which I'll show you in a minute, and one was a written article that went up on CNN.com. So I'll refer to them as the segment and the article. And we're here because those 2 publications, the segment and the article, they were tough, but they were fair and they were accurate. That's what CNN's reporting was. After the U.S. withdrew from Afghanistan in the fall of 2021, you're going to see the videos. Afghanistan was lawless chaos. People couldn't leave the country, and the Taliban was actively hunting Afghans who had worked with the U.S. military. Because of those horrible conditions, trapped Afghans, people who had helped the U.S. government for 2 decades, were forced to wait for the Taliban to find them and their families, or find a way to pay fees beyond their means to leave the country. Zachary Young was one of the private operators who saw these horrible conditions as a way to make money. You're going to hear, and you're going to see the documents, that there were many U.S. veterans, people who had served in Afghanistan, who volunteered. You're going to hear from General Young. Mr. Roche told you, he's going to come in, he's plaintiff's expert. He and his colleagues set up a very good volunteer veterans organization that evacuated like a couple thousand Afghans. You're going to hear about those wonderful volunteer veterans organizations who came in and did a good service. And you're going to hear about Mr. Young, who saw this desperation as a way to get rich. And he didn't hide it. You know, he's here, we're here because CNN published a story. But what you're going to see and what the evidence is going to show is that over and over again.
We're here because y'all are pieces of crap who got yourself into trouble. Remember, this is not the first time that CNN has been sued. Like, they are sued on what seems like a regular basis now for providing false stories or not the entire context and spinning it to meet their narrative. And they got caught. And someone had the financial means to take them to court.
Mr. Young advertised his services on LinkedIn. I don't know if you all use LinkedIn. A lot more people use Facebook, but LinkedIn is a social network site for businesses, for individuals looking for jobs, for individuals looking to get hired. Mr. Young advertised his services over and over again on LinkedIn, directly to sponsors sometimes, that's American companies, and directly to Afghans. And you're going to see his exchanges with those Afghans where he says, it's $14,500 for me to get you out of Afghanistan, which is, you're going to hear, is way more than any Afghan could ever pay. You're going to see CNN put up his picture. That was the picture that Mr. Young chose to use on his LinkedIn site, that he put up with every one of his messages. Back home in the U.S., in the fall of 2021, we Americans watched as networks like CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, all the big stations, they reported on those horrible conditions on the ground. They showed the desperation and the chaos that was left behind when our government withdrew our troops, and the dangerous situation we left for those people who helped us for 20 years. The segment and the article delivered this message. They delivered this message about those horrible and desperate conditions. Because of the failures of our government, Afghans who had pledged their loyalty to the U.S. were left with few good options. And you're going to see that part of that reporting was about Zach Young, his advertisements, and the people like him who saw this as nothing more than a way to make money. Every word you're going to see in CNN's reporting was true. Every word was accurate. And CNN's reporting was tough. But it was tough, and it was fair, and it was accurate. And that's what the evidence is going to show in this
It's called BS.
Now, since I was a younger man, and had a lot less gray hair caused by trials and kids, I was a federal prosecutor, and I prosecuted white-collar fraud.
No one cares.
Trials, I learned, were the best way to get to the truth. A lot of people say, oh,
Sorry, Flash fan. I held off as long as I could. But listening to this dude talk is like, I have comebacks for everything he says. I can't help it. I apologize. Welcome to Attitude with Squid.
jurors come in, they don't know anything, they can't be trusted. Completely disagree. You all have the power of using your common sense, your combined wisdom, your combined life experiences to look at all the evidence and get to the truth of the matter. And that's what you're going to be asked to do in this case. We trust you to do it. They trust you to do it. It's the best system in the world. But the evidence is what's really important. Now, Mr. Roche just told you a story. And that's all it was. It was a good story. That's all it was a story. I'm going to tell you a story. I hope it's as good as his. It might not be.
It's not.
But my opinion is just a story, too. Because opening statements, those are statements by lawyers, are not evidence. Nothing Mr. Roche said is evidence. Nothing I'm about to say is evidence. Rather, they're just competing views of what we think the evidence will show. And good lawyers, like Mr. Roche. They can tell you a story that isn't necessarily going to line up with the evidence. Now, I'm just going to give you one example, but you're going to see a lot more as you go through this trial. Now, Mr. Roche said there's a text or a Slack exchange where Mr. Marquardt says, we're going to nail this MF. And he's right, there is. But what Mr. Roche didn't tell you is that 2 lines later in that same exchange, Mr. Marquardt says, or maybe he'll just slip away. But that's what the lawyers can do. They can tell you a story that doesn't necessarily line up with the evidence. So what all of us in this courtroom are going to ask you to do is pay incredibly close attention to the actual evidence in the case, rather than just relying on my story or Mr. Roche's story. Now, I'm not going to break my opening down by kind of segments, but I'm going to tell you that during this trial, you're going to learn 3 very critical things. In November 21, CNN published a TV segment and the online article that included references to Mr. Young. These stories, as you're going to see, were carefully researched. They were carefully written, and many experienced journalists at CNN put eyes on these stories. They put eyes on the stories to make sure they were accurate. They put eyes on the stories to make sure they were fair. And the first important thing you're going to learn in this case is that neither story accused Mr. Young of doing anything illegal. Indeed, the reporting on Young truthfully reported his own public advertisements on LinkedIn. And as you're going to see in a couple minutes, they were almost all his own words. That's the first important thing you're going to see. The second important thing you're going to see is that Mr. Young, who has the burden in this case, will present no witness other than himself who will testify that they interpreted the stories that Mr. Young claims are the way that he did. Not a single person. He won't bring one single person who says, I watched the segment, I read the article, I saw it the same way as Mr. Young. Not a single one. Third, Mr. Young, whose burden it is, will present no witness who will testify about Mr. Young's reputation before the CNN publications or afterwards. He won't have any witness who will testify that they thought less of Mr. Young or wouldn't hire him because of the CNN stories. Not a single one. And you heard Mr. Roche talk about Mr. Young's background. All this service, all these skills. The fact that plaintiff can't bring one witness to testify that they thought less of him or that they wouldn't hire him tells you all you need to know about his case. It's just not there. Those 3 things, that's the case in a nutshell. And maybe I should sit down, but I'm going to go a little bit further. So I'm going to put a little more meat on the bones of what you're going to see. In 2021, the Biden administration withdrew our troops from Afghanistan. It was a disaster, and the Taliban took immediate control. And maybe one area where CNN and Mr. Young agree is that the conditions on the ground in Afghanistan were abhorrent. The Taliban is a repressive terrorist organization. It persecutes minority groups like Christians. It doesn't allow women basic freedoms. And third, it vowed to punish any Afghan who would work with the U.S. government. So as the U.S. pulled out, you'll see the videos, desperate Afghans fled to the airport. And you may have seen the video, they're like clinging on cargo planes. It's one of the most sad and horrifying images you can see. And then there was a suicide bombing at the airport. And 13 American service members lost their life, and 170 Afghans were killed. And that is the desperation that CNN did a ton of reporting on. But in the wake, so America leaves Afghanistan in that period. And in the wake of leaving Afghanistan, thousands of Afghans were trapped. And these 3 groups, women, minorities, U.S. loyal people, they faced assaults, they faced imprisonments, they faced death or worse because they dared to help the United States or because they were women who enjoyed basic freedoms for the last 20 years. So as I said, nonprofits and veterans groups started organizing volunteer campaigns immediately. And these noble people donated their time, worked their contacts, raised money from Americans in the United States, and charged those Afghans nothing for that. CNN covered the Afghanistan withdrawal extensively. In the lead up to the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan and the months that followed, CNN covered the dire situation on the ground. CNN reported on the policy failures by the Biden administration, both before and after the withdrawal. CNN reported on the brutal conditions imposed by the Taliban after the withdrawal. CNN reported on the suicide attacks at the airport. CNN reported on the danger that Afghans who helped the U.S. faced under the Taliban. Most importantly, for why we're here, CNN reported on evacuations. CNN ran multiple stories on evacuations during this period. CNN dedicated hours and hours of coverage to the situation in Afghanistan because, as awful as it is seeing images of people clinging to airplanes and people facing horrible persecution by the Taliban, this is a story that we as Americans need to see because it was a policy failure, that left people who were our friends in dire situation. And I know it's trite to say, but the saying goes, if we don't learn from our history, we're doomed to repeat it. And that's what CNN was doing.
Stop acting like
It
you
was showing
give a
Americans
shit
what was
now.
going on the ground. Alex Marquardt, who's going to be someone you're going to hear from in this case, you're going to see his name a ton. Mr. Roach mentioned him a bunch. He's a CNN reporter. He covers national security. He's been a professional reporter for nearly 20 years. During his time at CNN and before that at ABC News, Alex reported from war zones all over the world. This is what he's dedicated his life to: the Ukraine, Libya, Syria, Israel, Gaza. He's reported live from all of them, bringing these news from those conflict zones to our TVs. You're going to hear that he lived in the Middle East for 6 years, reporting on numerous conflicts in the region. He's been to Afghanistan, and he's reported from Afghanistan. He's exactly the reporter you would turn to cover this type of dire situation and help explain it to Americans. Indeed, after the Taliban took over, he did a number of stories about Afghan evacuations. He ran a story on U.S. evacuations of Afghan interpreters who helped the U.S. He did a story on the evacuation of Afghan pilots who trained with the U.S. military. He did a story on the CIA's role in evacuating a female Afghan American who had been volunteering in Kabul when Kabul fell. So in October, just after the withdrawal, Alex received information about people charging a lot of money for evacuations, $15,000 per person, which, as you'll hear to an Afghan, is just an unbelievably large amount of money. He believed, and you'll hear it from him, that it was important to report on the high prices people were charging desperate Afghans to escape death. And you'll see, one of the people that Alex learned of was Zachary Young. Alex saw Young's communications with multiple people, and so he started looking into it. And he quickly saw Young's advertisements plastered all over LinkedIn. So through the second half of October and into November, Alex Marquardt reported. He's a reporter, that's what he did. He talked to volunteers in Afghanistan and the United States who were trying to help Afghans. He talked to Afghans in Afghanistan desperate to get out. He talked to an Afghan in the US desperate to get his family out of Afghanistan. And you're going to hear that Alex wasn't working the story alone. There's another reporter, her name's Katie Bo-Lillis. She's also a national security reporter. And she helped Alex out. And you're going to hear that in the midst of Alex kind of looking at the story, looking at Mr. Young, Katie Bo-Lillis learns about Mr. Young completely independently, because he is so far out there on LinkedIn, sending these advertisements to everyone, trying to make as much money off the situation as he can. It's only when Mr. Marquardt and Ms. Lillis showed each other the information that they realized that they were both heard about Mr. Young independently. And here's exactly what Mr. Marquardt and Ms. Lillis saw, and what you're going to see in this case. Mr. Young was advertising to everyone on LinkedIn. He was charging over $14,000 a person to evacuate Afghans. He was promising people visas if they evacuated to certain countries.
Good Lord. Even I, as a layperson with like a tiny, tiny bit of military experience, can tell you what that $14,000 was for. That was not the person, but it costs money to get people out. Resources. Somebody's got to pay. Sponsors pay. Somebody has to pay and come up with the money to get people out. Jesus, Pete. And the fact that they can't decipher what those two things, like, just the common sense. And I think the jury saw right through this BS. Like, ugh.
They saw communications where Mr. Young communicated directly with desperate Afghans. They saw communications where, when Mr. Young was communicating with those Afghans, as soon as they said they didn't have a sponsor, Mr. Young would just stop responding. They saw communications where Mr. Young berated other Americans who had the gall to question what he was doing. Mr. Roach talked about one of those where he called this woman, Jill Kornetsky, a spiteful bee.
I would call her.
They saw messages where Mr. Young represented that he could secure Afghans' refugee status. And you're going to hear from Ms. Lillis and Mr. Marquardt that this especially caught their attention. Because of their experience reporting on Afghanistan and war-torn countries, they knew it was incredibly unlikely to be a promise that Mr. Young could actually keep. And you're going to hear Mr. Young's own testimony. He had no idea if he could give people refugee status, but he was out there making those representations himself. Now, Mr. Roach talked about some of the internal communications at CNN, where Mr. Marquardt and others made callous observations about Mr. Young. You're going to see that those weren't made in a vacuum. They were made when the CNN reporters saw how Mr. Young callously replied to a question about his prices. And if Afghan men pay prices, they should run for the border and see how far they get. And let's put that comment in context. You have desperate Afghans who are being persecuted. And when Mr. Young was questioned about his pricing, he told this person, have them run for the border and see how far they get. That was one of the comments that Mr. Marquardt and Ms. Lewis were responding to. Another one was where Mr. Young cussed out that volunteer, Jill Kornetsky, told her to F off, and then called her a spiteful bee because she had the gall to question his pricing. You're going to see this communication between Mr. Marquardt and Ms. Lewis. We're not hiding from them, but you're going to see as those two reporters learned more and more about Mr. Young, and they saw the seemingly impossible promises that he was making on LinkedIn, they expressed their disdain for him. And you're going to hear directly from them why they said those things. You're going to hear that from their perspective as reporters who have worked in war zones and seen true human despair, that Mr. Young's comments were completely offensive. Now, over the weeks that they worked the story, Mr. Marquardt and Ms. Lewis communicated with Mr. Young multiple times. They wanted to hear from Young. You're going to see that. They were trying to gather as much information for their story as they could possibly. You're going to see a very extensive back and forth on November 3rd of 2021, 8 days before the stories air, between Ms. Lewis and Mr. Young. They had a long back and forth where Katie Bowe Lewis, repeatedly asked Mr. Young to jump on the phone and talk to her. Mr. Young declined, but he kept texting back and forth. And you're going to see that Mr. Marquardt called Mr. Young on November 3rd, but he didn't answer. You're going to see that Mr. Marquardt texted Mr. Young on November 10th, but he didn't respond. And you're going to see that on November 11th, Mr. Marquardt reached out to Young, and he again didn't want to answer questions about his pricing. Mr. Young had no obligation to talk to CNN, but as you'll see, there can be no dispute. And we're going to go through it carefully. The CNN didn't try to learn as much as possible from Mr. Young as they could. And so I want to kind of talk about two things that Mr. Roche talked about. First, he said that until November 11th, right before the story happened, Mr. Young had no idea that CNN was working on a story about him. This could not be less true. You're going to see the back and forth between Ms. Lewis and Mr. Young on November 3rd, 8 days before the story, where Mr. Young threatens to sue CNN because he says, I already know what this story is about. The other fallacy that Mr. Roche talked about is this idea that Mr. Young didn't have enough time to respond. You're going to hear Mr. Young admit, when he takes the stand, that he actually didn't need more time to respond to the questions that Mr. Marquardt asked him. They were all very simple questions. And you're going to hear Mr. Young say, oh yeah, I could have answered that question in a second. I could have answered that question in a second. You're going to see, and the evidence is going to show, that over the course of 8 days before the publication, it became very clear to CNN that Mr. Young was going to give limited, false information to CNN, and that at the end, he was just trying to stonewall the story. So after about 2 to 3 weeks of reporting, Mr. Marquardt drafted this segment for a show on CNN called The Lead with Jake Tapper. Over a period of days, Mr. Marquardt wrote and produced this 4-minute segment. The story, and I'm going to show it to you in a second, because this is a defamation case, and defamation cases are about the publications. The story, as you'll see, focused on the terrible situation on the ground for Afghans looking to flee. As part of the story, Mr. Marquardt interviewed two Afghan men, who talked about their efforts to flee and to help family members get out. One Afghan, located in California, we'll hear from him in a second, told Alex he was desperate to get his family out. They were being targeted by the Taliban because his mother was a doctor who helped our service members. And how this man turned to someone on Facebook, not Mr. Young, who he'd heard was evacuating people. And when he begged for that man's help, he was told it would cost $10,000 a person to get his family of 10 out of Afghanistan, which was, of course, more money than he could possibly find. That wasn't about Mr. Young. You're going to hear that. Mr. Marquardt then interviewed another Afghan who worked as a contractor with the U.S. and who was still in Afghanistan. And that man spoke about how he met with someone in Afghanistan who wanted $50,000 to get his family on a flight list. That was also not about Mr. Young. The third minute of this 4-minute TV segment focuses on Mr. Young. And the story says that Mr. Young is charging $14,000 a person on LinkedIn, and it shows his LinkedIn posts where he advertises his services. And then the story ends, and you'll see it, with Mr. Young saying that he only expects payments from sponsors. Those were the words that he gave Katie Bowe Lewis, and CNN included his words in the story. Most importantly, what you're going to see about the segment is it never says Mr. Young's doing anything criminal. It never implies Mr. Young's doing anything criminal. The story says that Mr. Young is charging a lot of money to get people out of Afghanistan, and it uses his own words, only his own words, to explain that. Everything in the story, we're going to walk through it in a minute, everything the story reports about Mr. Young came directly from his posts on LinkedIn, or things he said directly to people on LinkedIn, or things he said directly to CNN. His own words.
Context?
Now, I'm going to put up the segment for you. G, can you just cue it up? DX 111. This is a defamation case. And you may ask why plaintiffs didn't show you the segment in their presentation. They had an hour to make a presentation. They went about 40 minutes. They chose not to show it to you. Because when you actually watch the segment and you actually look at the article, you'll see that there's no there there. So I implore you, watch the segment carefully. Watch it as many times as you can during this trial. Read the article carefully. Because you're going to see that there's nothing false about Mr. Young in any of it.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Mr. Meza, can we cue that up?
That's not what the jury thought.
In our Worldly today, the U.S. government, the Biden administration, says that as of last week, it had assisted in the departure of at least 377 U.S. citizens and 279 lawful permanent.
Can you all hear that?
Is there a way that we...
God, Tapper has a punchable face.
Is there a way we can bump it up?
Mom, CNN, get your guys that together. Last man, this is William Henry.
Pause it there.
The Biden.
Is that a little bit better?
It's about the same.
Good judge's
Yeah,
name.
just 1 second.
First, CNN, as media company, can't get the freaking courtroom media rights.
We're going to work through this, and hopefully we have I'm going to try to be really quiet. Hopefully you all can do your best.
Dad, you be quiet. Something that's
In our
never going to
Worldly
happen
today,
for
the U.S.
$500.
government, the
Alex.
Biden administration says that as of last week, it had assisted in the departure of at least 377 U.S. citizens and 279 lawful permanent residents of the U.S. from Afghanistan since August 31st. Still, many Afghans who desperately want to flee Taliban rule, and Afghans who say their lives are at stake, they remain behind. As CNN's Alex Marquardt has discovered, Afghans trying to get out of the country face a black market full of promises, demands of exorbitant fees, and no guarantee of safety or success.
Stop it right there. So that is the first 40 seconds of the video. As you can see, it's a discussion of the U.S. evacuating Americans and a lack of options for Afghans who want to leave. And you'll see that this thing at the bottom is called the banner. We'll refer to that through this trial. You'll see that the banner says Afghans trying to flee Taliban face black markets, exorbitant fees, etc. As you can see in this first 40 seconds of this video, nothing about Mr. Young.
If you're going to force me to watch CNN, at least give me popcorn or like liquor or something.
These are the heavy steps of a young man trying to save his family. He's just 26 years old and lives in California. We can't show his face for the safety of his family in Afghanistan.
I'm desperate. The danger is imminent.
Since the chaotic international withdrawal from Afghanistan, his parents, siblings, and wife have been in hiding from the Taliban, who in the past, the young man says, have violently beaten his father, a doctor, and been angry with his mother, a women's rights activist who worked with the U.S.
Taliban left an announcement to my parents that anybody who helped them find my parents or my family that ends up with their execution will gain a prize.
They put a bounty on your family's head.
Exactly. This is really serious. They went to our house. They destroyed every single thing.
Desperate, he turned to Facebook, finding people offering ways to get Afghans out of the country for a price.
That person came up to me and told me, hey, you know what, you got to pay $10,000 per person in order to be evacuated then.
Per person?
9, 10 people. It would be like $100,000, and I cannot provide $100,000 in cash. In a way, like even if I provide that money, there is no guarantee that they will be evacuated.
According to Afghans and activists we've spoken with, desperate Afghans are now being exploited, like that young man, told that they can get them or their families out if they pay exorbitant, often impossible amounts.
So that's the first interview that goes on in the story. We're now up to 210 on the story. As you just saw, the first interview features this man in California who was talking to someone on Facebook, not Mr. Young. And the story is all about how Afghans are desperate and stuck, and that people are charging prices that no Afghan could pay.
Yeah, and then you showed his picture and talked about him, which implied that he was doing the same thing. It's guilt by implication. And just because you only mention him 10 seconds in the story, it's like the freaking what the hell's case. It only takes one person seeing the signs to make it defamation. You don't need freaking billions of people or make an entire story. You just need the statements, which can take 3 seconds. It doesn't matter how long it takes. Doesn't matter how long they talked about him. It's what they said. He's trying to make this all about, well, they did this story and it was in general. And it's all about, hey, we're a minute and a half in and you haven't heard from him yet, or heard about him yet. That's not the freaking point, you idiot. Stop trying to deflect.
And we're now 2 minutes, 10 seconds in. Mr. Young's name has not been mentioned at all.
Doesn't matter.
Only one family. $50,000.
We Skyped with a father of 3 in Kabul who had just met with a man offering to get them on an evacuation flight list.
They want to leave the country. If you say yes, they're going to say, okay, pay for it. I said, how we can pay that much money right now? It's only business matters. People are making $100,000 per day.
This man, whose identity we also need to hide, worked as a contractor for USAID. He's a special interest visa applicant for the U.S. The kind of Afghan citizen the Biden administration says they're working to.
You notice that USAID, also known as USAID, which is the same thing Doge looked at and said, hey, we need to shut this down. The same thing I looked at last year, and we went through a spending report on what USAID has spent money on. No. So whenever you freaking see USAID, they try USAID, it's USAID, like same agency.
Evacuate. What is the U.S. doing that you know of to try to get you and your family out?
Unfortunately, they are not doing now anything. Up to 31st, they said everything is closed and it's finished. We did not receive anything back from U.S. Embassy or from any other organization.
We are now 3 minutes and 2 seconds in the story. We've now interviewed a second Afghan person. That guy is in Afghanistan. Focused on people offering desperate Afghans flights out of the country, as you heard. He worked as a contractor for the U.S. government.
From the very beginning, this would make me angry because he's doing what he needs to do. I get it. Everybody is entitled to a defense and you're trying to defend your client. I get that. But like, if I were the jury at this point in time, I'd be like, this is bullshit because that's not the point. The point is that they made a defamatory statement, not how many defamatory statements they made, not how long it took to make the defamatory statements, not that he wasn't the center of attention and he wasn't the primary person involved in this story. That you're deflecting from the facts. Yep. Queen of the pettyverse.
And it's highlighting the fact that the U.S. government's not doing enough. That's the focus of the story.
So he went online, where he found a man named Zachary Young, who was one of many advertising evacuations from Afghanistan, posting just this.
Stop it. So now we're at 3:10 in the story, and Mr. Young is first introduced. And so you'll see, we just saw his picture, but that is the same picture from LinkedIn. That's where CNN got it. And as you'll see, this is his open advertisements to anyone, including Afghans, on LinkedIn. And see, the first thing CNN does is it highlights his own words. If you are a sponsor with funding, series to evacuate people from Afghanistan on short notice, please reach out. We can provide references and we can deliver. So you can see, in the very first thing they say about, CNN says about Mr. Young, they're highlighting his words, where in this one, he's saying, if you are a sponsor, contact me. A sponsor being an American company or an NGO looking to pay for Afghans to get out. Mr. Messer?
We can deliver. One LinkedIn user.
So again, we go to a next part of Mr. Young. I want to rewind it and play it in full again. But the next thing that's highlighted about Mr. Young, again, his own words. And this was a conversation Mr. Young had with someone before he deleted it. You can hear about that in a second. And so this is the conversation. Yes, what are you charging and where does this get her? Mr. Young responds, $75,000 for one vehicle, 5 to 6 passengers, Kabul to Peshawar. Can also facilitate passports and visits and transit to Dushanbe, but again, it costs money. Again, these are his own words. This was somebody asking him, what are you charging? And these are the prices that he is giving, $75,000 for a vehicle, for a ride. Mr. Mezza, can start again?
Posted messages with Young,
where Young said go back like 10 seconds. Thank you.
It was one of many advertising evacuations from Afghanistan, posting just this week, we can deliver. One LinkedIn user posted messages with Young, where Young said it would be $75,000 for a car to Pakistan. He told another it would be $14,500 per person to get to the United Arab Emirates or Albania for another $4,000. Prices well.
So again, now this is the third thing talking about Mr. Young. Again, this was another advertisement that he made on LinkedIn. You see, there's his face. Now he's charging flights for $14,500 per person, and you're going to hear in this trial that Mr. Young never evacuated any.
Once again, the implication is that he's charging that to people, not to individuals. No, gas costs money. Finding a vehicle costs money. Finding people who are willing to risk their lives. That's an expensive business. It's the more difficult the job and the more dangerous the job, the more money they're going to charge. So the people actually doing the extraction want to get paid. Sorry, no one in this world works for free except YouTubers who don't get monetized. But that's not the point. I digress. The lack of like logic and trying to like skip from A to Z without doing the rest of the alphabet and connecting all the dots, it's mind-boggling. And if I were the jury right now, I would be like, oh, is this dude done yet? We don't even need to go any farther than this. I don't need to see any more facts. This is all I needed to see. Are we done?
He won by flight. He promises a 4-month visa in the United Arab Emirates. You're going to hear that he had no idea how he would ever do that. Then he says, sponsor needs to arrange onward travel. So a sponsor could arrange onward travel, or we can offer onward to Albania for an additional $4,000, which includes refugee status on arrival. So again, this is Mr. Young's own words, offering to Afghans and everyone that he can arrange refugee status in a country called Albania. And then you can see at the bottom, it says, if they have no passport, the price is an additional $1,000. Mr. Young's own words, CNN found them, they published them. But just to be very clear, this is what Mr. Young had put up on LinkedIn before CNN published it. Right?
Beyond the reach of most Afghans. We got Young's number and called, but he didn't pick up. In a text message, he told CNN that Afghans trying to leave are expected to have sponsors pay for them. If someone reaches out, we need to understand if they have a sponsor behind them to be able to pay evacuation costs, which Young says are highly volatile and based on environmental reality.
Stop right there, thank you. Now as we're getting towards the end of the 1 minute of the story, which is about Mr. Young, this was the comment that he made to CNN when they spoke to him about reporting. And this was his comment saying, if someone reaches out, we need to understand if they have a sponsor behind them to be able to pay evacuation costs. CNN took the quote that Mr. Young had given CNN during its reporting and put it in the story. That was Mr. Young's explanation for why he was charging so much money.
So 75,000 divided by 6 is $12,500 per person. So 12 to 15,000 is accurate.
And CNN used it. That's the information he gave.
It out of context.
Young repeatedly declined to break down the cost or say if he's making money. Back in California, Young...
And so now it's 3:58. The 1 minute portion about Mr. Young of this 4-minute story is over until the very end. Thank you, Mr. Reza.
The Afghan American tells us even though he can't pay, he's still pleading to get his family out.
I have sent tons of texts asking these people, begging them to evacuate my family. If I don't be able to evacuate them within the next 2 weeks, I think I will lose them all. I think I will lose them all, my family.
And just moments ago, that young man told me that the Taliban has now issued summons for his family in hiding, indicating his father believes that the Taliban really is after them. Now, the Biden administration continues to work on evacuating people, but as you can see there are just so many more Afghans who want to get out of the country, and that just drives prices higher and higher. In another message, that person offering those evacuations, Zachary Young, he wrote, availability is extremely limited and demand is high. Jake, he goes on to say, that's how economics works, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. Alex Marquardt, thanks so much for that important report. Coming up, Xi Jinping's power play, the new move from
that is the entire segment, why we're here, the first half of why we're here. And as you can see, when the story ends, again, CNN uses Mr. Young's own words. Things he was fine with saying. That's how economics works, unfortunately. Now, the evidence is going to show that after Mr. Marquardt wrote that script for the segment that the lead played, it went through CNN's extensive vetting process. And in this review process,
I need Flash fan, you know what I need to make? I need to make bullshit flags. Oh my God, that's what I need. I need bullshit flags because I'm about to throw one.
Referred to as the triad. Senior experienced editors with no prior involvement in the case independently review the script to ensure that it's fit for publication. And they use independent people because they want to make sure that we're testing it out, right? We're making sure that it's accurate. We're making sure that it's fair. There are two important components of the triad that we're going to talk about. The first is the row, where one senior editor checks the story to make sure it's factually accurate. That means if we're making assertions in the segment, can we say this? Do we have the support for it? CNN ran this story through that process. The second is called standards and practices. And that's where a different senior editor reviews a story and decides, okay, it's accurate, but is it fair? Is it something that we should publish? And you're going to hear from that editor, Emma Lacey-Bordeaux, and you're going to hear that she thought the story was fair. You're going to hear and see from these experienced editors.
Well, they thought, okay, when someone says, I think that's fair, you have to think about that for a second. They think that's fair in their mind. Whether that's fair to the average person is yet to be seen. Like, y'all, this is where we're, oh, it's fair. Yeah, it's fair when you're someone looking for a hit piece. Not the average person would see that as unfair. Like, the spin on all of this. And Flash Fan, you and I have had this conversation hundreds of times about how people spin things. It's not the words that they say, it's what they don't say. It's what they skip over. Yeah, she thought it was fair. Well, what's her end game? Is she going to make money off of this story? Then of course she thinks it's fair. It's all about the money. With all these lawsuits, how come CNN don't go bankrupt decades ago? Because they're owned by a billionaire. Yeah, it's like when Daryl Brooks used to say, it'd be fair to say. Yeah, your definition of fair and my definition are very different. Billionaires. They always talk about how Republicans are backed by billionaires. They never seem to mention, like, the fact that, you know, Bezos owns the Washington Post. Like, you know, they never seem to think that most media outlets are owned by billionaires on both sides of the aisle. No matter how independent or skewed they are, they're all owned by billionaires. Like, and it's all about the money. As Mr. Wood says, follow the money. Follow the money, follow the money, follow the money. Just keep following the money, and you'll find the answers.
Who did an independent review of the TV segment, and together, after much discussion and back and forth, confirmed that the segment was fit for publication. And the point of this process is to ensure that CNN's reporting is fair and it's accurate. You're going to hear that all these people believe the story fairly and accurately depicted the conditions the desperate Afghans were facing, and it was entirely appropriate and fair to talk about Mr. Young's own advertising campaign. You're going to hear that they believe the story fairly described how Young was trying to profit off of human misery. You're also going to hear that they had no intention of publishing a segment that conveyed Mr. Young was doing anything illegal. You're going to hear it directly from them. Mr. Roche used the word sensational. I lost track. It was 3 or 4 times. There is no evidence in this case that there was anything sensational about the story. You all saw it. The headline wasn't American targets Afghans or ex-CIA guy in Vienna, super spy targets Afghans. It had none of that. It's a 4-minute story that doesn't mention Zachary Young until the 3rd minute.
Doesn't matter.
Moreover, you're going to hear that the Jake Tapper show runs from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. on the East Coast.
Once again, does not matter. Does not matter. He's mentioning things that don't matter. 40 minutes of this bullcrap has been things that do not matter. Like, does not matter. And after he's done, we're gonna call it a day. We're only gonna do 2 to 2.5 hours of this whenever we do it, probably on Friday mornings, because you can only take so much CNN before you get brain rot.
Now, if you're running a sensational story, you'd probably lead with this, something like that. This is a big story, a big expose we got. This story played at approximately 5:30 p.m., right in the middle of the second hour. Not exactly the time slot you would use to draw viewers with sensationalized reporting.
Whoa. So you admit CNN uses sensational reporting? You admit it. He just admitted that CNN uses sensationalized reporting.
The evidence is going to show that the TV story, the segment, never said Mr. Young was doing anything illegal. Mr. Young contends that using the phrase black market in the banner implied he was. You're going to hear from Mr. Young, you're going to hear from Mr. Young's expert, you're going to hear from the CNN witnesses, that the term black market was a perfect description of the market the Afghans were facing to get out of the country. That banner played throughout the story. It played long before the story focused on Young, and when it was up after Mr. Young's portion. But black market was a perfect way to describe what was going on in Afghanistan. You're going to hear from Zachary Young himself, that after the brutal Taliban captured the country, women couldn't move around.
True, but they don't admit it.
If you wanted to get a woman out of the country, like Mr. Young was doing, you had to use safe houses. You had to use covert moves. You're going to hear Mr. Young testify that he was so concerned about security with people on the ground that he deleted his messages. Now, If this were a situation where a woman who wanted to get out of Afghanistan because it was brutal could simply go to the airport, get on her phone, use Expedia, there would be no reason for Mr. Young to have a job. There would be no black market. But the black market, in this case, was created because the Taliban wasn't letting people leave, and people were actually threatened with harm, death, or even worse if they stayed. If you were a desperate Afghan looking to flee, you needed to find an operator like Mr. Young and then hide from the Taliban until you could be moved out of the country. And you're going to hear all that. Black market was an absolutely accurate way to describe the situation in Afghanistan. And as you're going to see in the instructions, when we finally get there, that when you evaluate what words mean in these stories, you look at them in context. And in the context of this story, what you just saw, black market was a perfect way to describe the situation. It described the situation and it said nothing about it.
CNN's rich for talking about context and anything like context. CNN, you should not talk about someone using context to make your actions justifiable, because you of all people, damn.
Illegality. So we're almost done. After the TV segment airs, Mr. Marquardt drafted an article for CNN's website. And the evidence will show that at that time, CNN had a completely different process for editing a TV segment and for editing a digital article. So different people at CNN worked on both. So on the afternoon of November 11th, Mr. Marquardt sends his draft article off to a digital editor, someone who hadn't been involved. His name's Mr. Tom Lumley. Mr. Roche talked about him, with the hopes that the story could be published the same day. The written story could be published at the same time as the TV segment. And you're going to hear from Mr. Lumley very frankly that he thought the TV segment was good, but the written article needed more work. And he was very frank about it. He didn't like it. He didn't like the written story that Mr. Marquardt had crafted. And so you're going to see that over the next 2 days, from November 11th to November 13th, Mr. Lumley revised the article, and he revised it pretty substantially. And he sent it through the try-it process again to make sure that it was fit for production, fit for publication. And only when that team and that try-it independently reviewed and approved it again was it published on November 13th, 2 days later. And now you heard Mr. Young's lawyer, you heard Mr. Roche talk about Mr. Lumley's complaints about the story. And you're going to see that he said the story is filled with holes like Swiss cheese, and he didn't like it, and it was half a story. And Mr. Lumley thought there was more of a story to tell. That's his main complaint. You're going to hear that from him. But you're also going to hear Mr. Lumley say that he thought the story was accurate as it related to Mr. Young. We're not hiding from Mr. Lumley. Mr. Lumley's comments about the story, the written story, and that it needed work, are direct evidence that CNN employed a rigorous process. That editors at CNN had free rein to speak up and say, hey, let's slow down, hold on. Before we publish, let's make sure this is better. The show CNN's editors weren't a rubber stamp. They were carefully considering the work product and speaking up where they believed they needed to. So let's look at the article now, which is the second piece in this case. Mr. de Meza, we won't have a sound problem with the article. This is the article, and you can just see the headline first. Some Afghans trying to flee country face exorbitant costs as Blinken touts success of efforts to help Americans. So right from the jump, again, this does not look like a sensational headline. I mean, many people may be fans of Tony Blinken, the soon-to-be ex-Secretary of State, but wouldn't say this is a sensationalized headline. But as you can see, it's a slightly different focus from the segment because it's focusing on Blinken and the efforts to help Americans. So let's look at the first page of the article. Can you blow that up, Mr. de Meza? Thank you. So these are the first two paragraphs of the story that was ultimately published. Afghans desperate to flee the country are increasingly having to negotiate with private operators charging exorbitant sums, while U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken announced on Friday that all Americans who have asked to leave Afghanistan have been offered an opportunity to do so. So that first paragraph, which in reporting is like, the first two paragraphs are the most important thing. They tell the reader what the story is going to be about, is that this is about the government trying to get Americans out of Afghanistan. It goes on to say there are fewer than 100 American citizens in Afghanistan who are ready to leave, according to the State Department. And Blinken said Friday that there are a couple hundred more for now who want to stay. That's the first page. Let's go to the second page. If you could blow up the top half, Mr. Meza. Yeah, keep going down until above. There's no guarantee. Yeah, thank you. So this is the second page. But in addition to those Americans, there are countless Afghans, including thousands who worked for or aided the U.S. during the 20-year war or believe they are in danger of being targeted by the Taliban or frantically trying to leave. The increased sense of desperation and limited space on evacuation routes have fostered a private market with private operations demanding exorbitant sums, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars, to transport people outside the country by different means and routes with no guarantee of success. The operators include individuals and groups both inside and outside of Afghanistan, often contacted on social media. Then the next paragraph talks about a family of 10 hiding in Western Afghanistan. And then as you see, you go down, the 26-year-old who was in California turned to Facebook. So this is repeating the interview from the segment. And there's some of his quotes. So Mr. Mezek, you can go back up to the full page. Now grab the bottom. It's getting worse now because it's becoming normalized and desperation has grown, says Hazami Barmada, a humanitarian aid worker who has organized flights out of Afghanistan. So now this is something new that's been added to the digital piece. And you're going to hear that telling a story on TV and doing digital reporting is slightly different. You have an article to include content. And so now this is an interview with this, I'm going to butcher names and I apologize in advance, Hazami Barmada, who's a humanitarian aid worker. And that's what this is focusing on. But then you see at the bottom, in Kabul, a father is hiding with his wife and 3 young boys, changing locations every 2 weeks, and asking others to drop off his son at school so he's not seen. And so now we're going to go to the next page. But now this is referring to the second interview that was done in the TV segment. You go to the third page, Mr. Meza. If you could blow up the top. Yeah, thank you. All the way down to, that's fine. All the way down to that's how economics work. Thank you. And so you start at the top. Again, looking at this second paragraph, last week he says he met with a man in Kabul who told him it would be $50,000 to get his family on a list for an evacuation flight. And he kind of talks about the process that he's going through. So that's the second interview. So this is very much like the segment. Now down at the bottom, the very last paragraph before we get to the jump says, like young Afghan American in California, the father tried multiple avenues. On LinkedIn, he spotted posts by Zachary Young, who repeatedly advertised evacuations to Afghanistan, promising this week, we can deliver. Young appears to have at least recently spent time in Austria, communicated on an Austrian number, and met someone in Vienna who CNN spoke with. So, as you can see, Mr. Young, much like the TV segment, is not mentioned until the third page of the article. And he's not mentioned, you can count it up, he's not mentioned until 20 paragraphs into the story.
Doesn't matter.
And anyone who got bored reading the first 2 pages would never even have seen his name.
Doesn't matter.
Again, we're going to, if this will give us.
Did he just admit that CNN writes boring articles as well because no one's going to read past the second? Oh, they're going to get bored with it. No one's going to read past the second page. They won't see his name anyway. Not the point. But thanks for admitting that CNN hires very terrible writers.
You go back to the main document and just blow up that last bottom part. When asked about his prices, Young responded to several people on the site, referring to LinkedIn, that a car from Kabul into Pakistan would be $75,000 or $14,500 per person for a flight to the UAE. To get to Albania with refugee status, Young said would be $4,000 more. So again, this is now the reference to Young quoting his exact words that he made on LinkedIn. And then they say, Mr. Young says, per person is expensive because availability is extremely limited and demand is high. He told the person who shared his messages with CNN. That's how economics works, unfortunately. Again, these are Mr. Young's own words. We go to the fourth page, please. Yeah, if you can blow that up. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, very good. Go all the way up. Yeah, thank you. Young declined to speak on the phone, but sent in a text message that he asked Afghans who want to leave to have sponsors to cover them. If someone reaches out, they need to understand if they have a sponsor behind them to be able to pay evacuation costs. So again, that was a statement that Mr. Young made to Katie Bo-Lillis about who he expects to pay. And he's saying, we expect sponsors to pay. And CNN, in his own words.
Yeah, sponsors to pay. Sponsors.
And that's the article. So, you can take that down, Mr. Mesa. The segment was up on November 11th. The article ran on November 13th. And for 5 months after this, November, December, January, February, until mid-March, no one, not Mr. Young, not anyone else, said to CNN, you got a problem with this story. It's defaming Mr. Young. Nothing. 5 months in the middle of March, 5 months after the story ran, November, December, January, February, March, Mr. Young sends a notice to CNN saying, hey, black market defames me.
Pay for Marine.
5 months. And upon seeing that notice, CNN did a retraction. And it apologized directly to Mr. Young for using the term black market. And CNN issued that apology because it did not intend to imply that Mr. Young was doing anything illegal. And you're going to hear that CNN issued that apology because it never considered that Mr. Young or anyone else would take that implication from the story. You're also going to see that the correction that CNN did was viewed by more viewers on CNN than the first story on Jake Tapper's The League was. It was viewed like by 800,000 people. Did CNN say Mr. Young did anything illegal? Absolutely not. You saw it. Were Mr. Young's advertisements and his efforts to get people out of Afghanistan newsworthy? Absolutely so. Now, you're going to hear from Mr. Young himself that at about the time Mr. Young begins talking to lawyers, and this is December, so about a month after the publications, he did something remarkable. He took his phone and he took screenshots of the things that he wanted to save, communications that he thought were helpful to his case. And then he deleted everything else related to Afghanistan. You're going to see that Mr. Young was advertising on LinkedIn and communicating with people on LinkedIn about evacuations, and he deleted all of those records after he was meeting with lawyers to bring a case against CNN. And when we get done with this case, I'm going to come back and ask you to make certain findings about what that means. But you know
the safety for the people involved. And I'm sure he told his lawyers that he was doing it.
Truth already. He deleted those records because he knew if he was bringing a case, he was going to have to produce those things, and it wasn't going to help. You're also going to see that, for instance, case, Mr. Young.
No, pretty accurate.
You're going to see that Mr. Young deleted all of his contact information for all of those people. You're going to see that he didn't keep any records of his communications with those people. You're going to see that he actually did some of these deletions after he filed this lawsuit. And this goes back to my point about him not bringing a single witness who's going to testify about his reputation that they thought less of him. He's not going to do that because there is no one. But he also made it impossible for CNN to actually go and bring those people. He deleted those records because he didn't want you to see those communications because he knew it wouldn't help his case. As you heard from Mr. Young's lawyers, he contends the segment in the article implied he was operating illegally. And I've talked a lot about this. I'm about to sit down. But let's talk about what you're not going to see during this trial. You heard Mr. Young's lawyer. He claimed that Mr. Young was this first-class professional. All this experience, deep professional contacts. Mr. Young is not going to call a single witness who testified they interpreted the CNN segments the way he does. Mr. Young's not going to call a single witness who will testify that they thought less of Mr. Young because of the CNN segments. You're not going to see a single witness who will testify that they thought the story implied anything false about Mr. Young besides him. With contacts like he claims he had, it surely would be easy to find someone who would support your case. You won't hear any of this from Mr. Young because what he claims is not true. Through this trial, you're going to hear and see the following things. You're going to see that the situation, as we both described in Afghanistan, was lawless, it was chaotic, and it was desperate. And you're going to see that CNN's reporting, as we just saw, was fair and it was accurate.
That
and you're not going to see a single witness who interpreted Mr. Young's, who interpreted the CNN reporting the way Mr. Young claims. And you're not going to see a single witness who will testify that they thought less of Mr. Young or wouldn't hire him. Simply put, for those three reasons, Mr. Young will not be able to meet his burden of proving his case. And for all of those reasons, in a lot more detail that we're going to get into, and I'm going to sit down now and we're going to start with this case. For all of those reasons, at the end of this trial, once all the testimony is complete, once you've had a chance to actually look at the exhibits, hear the witnesses, hear what they thought, I'm going to come back and ask you to return the only verdict that is supported by the evidence, and that's that CNN is not lying. Mr. Young, thank you for your time. Thank you for your service. We all appreciate it. Thank you.
And if you want to call your first witness.
Your Honor, Plaintiff called Mr. Young.
All right. And on that note, we are going to call it a day. I am looking for documents on the new case. We'll probably be talking about that sometime soon. I need to spend some time where I just look for documents, but it's finding the time. She's been amazing this morning, like amazing. It's crazy. She's running around. She's playing with her stuff. She'll come over and want a little bit of attention, and then she goes back to what this is how she normally is. This is how she normally is. She's Miss Independent. So the fact that you don't see her, she's like 10 feet from me. She's just on the other side of the room with her stuff. I'm looking for first. Texas is not easy with their documents, not like Florida. Even when I did a public information request and they emailed me something, they only emailed me the first page of what I asked for. So I had to go to Twitter and get it from somebody's Twitter account, who posted the affidavit one page at a time. When I asked for the affidavit, they sent me the cover page. They didn't send me the whole damn affidavit. And it's like, they're just, so now that it's actually in the court system and not in the actual like police department anymore, it's a lot easier, but I still have to do some work. And I'm looking into this guy that's representing the family because he just sounds like a shitbag in itself. Like, he has mugshots. Like, it, so I don't know. Mr. Squid and I even had conversations about Carmelo Anthony. Mr. Squid's coworkers had conversations about Carmelo Anthony, and if he's going to go to jail, and when he goes to jail, how will he do in jail? Because Texas has a problem in their prisons, from what I understood from the articles that he read, and I have to figure out where he got his information from. The AB is huge in Texas prisons. And they're either going to hurt him. Unfortunately, there's going to be some Gen Pop justice, because and that's the thing. I don't think the actual crime had anything to do with race, but everybody in the world making it out to be, everybody on his side trying to make it out to be a race thing, I think become something that it wasn't. Do I believe he was a good kid? Yes. Do good people screw up, and sometimes screw up to the point of no return? Yes, it happens. However, I don't think race had anything to do with the initial issue. I think I think a lot of things had to do with it, but race wasn't one of them. However, that being said, the people in prison, they have TV. They know that he's raised a lot of money. So if he goes to prison, I'm pretty sure they're going to be trying to take some of that money for protection. So yeah, that completely opposite. And whatever you think of that situation in Minnesota, these two things are not, the only thing that they have in common is their skin color. And I'm sorry, if the world thinks that two people are alike because they have the same skin color, that's a big problem. That's a big problem. But anyway, I'm going to see where we can, I think people are doing the Karen Reed trial. There's a lot of people doing Karen Reed. That's one of the reasons that I'm not doing Karen Reed, is because there is just so many people doing it that know better than me what they're doing or like about the case. I'm not unbelievably knowledgeable about the Karen Reed case. So I think I have it set up to go to Mo. Yep. All right. Y'all have a great day. Go tell Mo I said hi. I love you guys, and I will see you probably tomorrow, depending on how much research I can get done. I'm going to, God forbid, try and record a video this weekend about the judicial code of conduct and what a judge is, supposed to do, versus what we want them to do or what we think they have to do. Because there's been some issues that have been bugging me lately. And yeah, I just gotta, but I don't want to do a live stream about it because I get derailed by chat. And I want this to be factual. And if I get derailed by, if I get derailed by chat, and this is where chat and I tend to disagree. If you know the situation I'm talking about, people are saying that the judge needs to or the Judge Belaytho needs to investigate things and look into. He can't. It's an ethical dilemma of him researching. So he's not allowed. So if it's not in a document, it's not going to happen and he's not going to be seen. So the only person that you can blame for the judge not knowing about what's going on is Randy. So as much as I think Randy's a good lawyer, like the only person that the people who are like, the judge needs to know about, the judge needs to know about all the money that they've got. The only way the judge is going to know is if a lawyer tells them. And the only lawyer that's going to tell them is Randy. So the fact that Randy hasn't put it in a motion, the only person you can blame is Randy. I mean, you can't blame the judge for not having this information when no one tells him. He can't do an independent investigation. And I've seen multiple comments of people saying the judge is biased, the judge is this. He doesn't know. He doesn't know because he's not supposed to know unless it's in a motion. Unless it's on the court record, the judge don't care because the judge ethically cannot care. Y'all. Y'all. Yeah, and Flash Fan, yeah, they can be brutal. And instead of arguing with chat, I'm going to record a video on what I believe based on the judicial code of ethics. And not all judges are good, but these are things that all judges have to follow. And sometimes it just doesn't work in our favor. The judges don't know the context because no one tells them. Yep. Only way he'll know is if it's in a bench trial or if it's in a motion. If Randy puts it in a motion, Randy puts it in a motion. Somehow Randy's got to get it into a motion of like they claim indigent status, but yet here's this. Put it in a motion. I'm sure he could do it better than I can considering he is a lawyer, but put it in a motion. You can't do it. You can't just not put it in a motion and then not understand why people, don't know why the judge doesn't know the context. But anyway, y'all have a great day. We'll get to that one at another time. And I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.